Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to NBR, or as we like to call it around here, Nothing But Rants, the show where I find topics that I'm oddly passionate about and I pontificate upon them. These are not hot takes, but rather takes that I'm hot about. What's up? You really like that?
Let's shut up and grind some tape.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into the Film Guy Network on a fabulous Tuesday evening. As always, it is a loaded show, but I want to start tonight's show with this right here. Should we prepare for some chaos? You know, college football got a ton of chaos all the time, it seems like nowadays, but there is this magical portal window opening up. I don't know about you guys, but when I heard do you think we should rename the transfer portal? The idea of a portal, a little bit futuristic for me. But what other name would, it's a complete sidebar here to start the show, but transfer portal. When I first heard of it, I thought of like Austin Powers is like, white and black machine that spun and like made you dizzy, and then you jumped into it and you whoop, whoop, and bam, you're in the 1960s. You walk into this magical portal and whoop, whoop. All of a sudden you were a dog. Now you're a Penn State Nittany Lion. Anyways, portal coming up. Most people expecting a lot of chaos, right? As you should be. There is an opportunity for rosters to change over, right? Especially considering the rate at which some of these programs around college football are spending money as of late. The money that is going out and the tampering that is happening and the roster transitions and the roster overhauls that have happened as of late, particularly during the December portal window. A lot of people looking at this April window after spring practice concludes as an opportunity for chaos to create itself again on the college football world. Or there's a possibility that the transfer portal window coming up could be an utter dud. You know, kind of like it was last summer. Last summer, there was Barry Alexander and a bunch of people who didn't find homes. That's exactly what it was last summer. But this summer, perhaps there could be something different. I am projecting that it's going to be kind of a dud. And here's why. When I start looking at opportunities for roster overhaul, I look for two things, right? I look for the money to create it to happen, right? Something like we saw what Ole Miss did this last offseason, like December cost Ole Miss's boosters a good bit of money. I think we can talk about that openly, right? I look for money and I look for room, particularly room. Like people will talk about the 85 as this, the 85 scholarship limit as if it does not exist. And to an extent, I'm with you, particularly with some of these schools we're going to talk about tonight that are north of 100 scholarship athletes that are on their roster per just general research that you can find, right? Some of these schools are applying it as if the 85 does not exist, as if you can just pay somebody NIL and allow them to stay on roster because you're, making them whole, essentially, right? You got to pay tuition, but here's tuition via NIL. There's obvious room for that nowadays with name, image, and likeness. How often and how frequent is that happening? I don't know. But in order to make these massive overhauls, in order to make these massive moves or go out and tamper and steal a bunch of football players from other rosters, you got to have the room and you got to have the assets to do so. So we can talk about assets in a little bit, but let's talk about room. I look around college football right now and I talk to people around college football right now, whether it be in the SEC or whether it be in the Big Ten. And I see a bunch of schools that are pinned up on the number right now, boys and girls. I don't see a bunch of teams with a bunch of room to be out here tampering and bringing in additions because I'm going to be honest with you, the great teams tamper in October. The great teams tamper in November. They ain't out here tampering in April. They're getting the job done in December so they can get them on the roster and get them implemented in April, right? I mean, look around the state of college football right now, guys. The big money players, the big recruiting players in the world of college football right now. Ohio State's got 85 scholarship players on roster right now per their reporting, what I read this morning. Georgia's got 85, a hard 85. But guess what? They got 6 freshmen coming in still set to enroll onto this roster this summer. They're going to be over or at least pinned up on the number. Bama's at 87, but Brooks, they had 18 guys leave this spring. You're right, but they brought in a bunch and they were still probably pinned up on the number. Everything I saw said 87-ish, plus Caden Proctor coming in this fall or this summer, right? So they're pinned up on the number. Oregon, 87-ish. Florida State, 85 plus-ish. Where's DJU in the mix as well, right? Got some incoming transfers still there. USC right at 81. Okay, still got some room to play with right there, does USC. But hey, how many of those early enrollees, how many of those summer enrollees did they have counted for? We don't know quite yet. Texas, big money player, right? Texas always coming out here and pillaging through rosters. Texas pinned up at 89 right now. And here's where it gets really freaking bonkers. There are some schools, like I said, that are way, way over the number. LSU sitting at 94 right now. 94. Auburn's got 100 plus. I stopped counting at 100. Oklahoma, 100 plus. Stop counting at 100. Now, again, how many of these guys have been told, hey, you don't have a scholarship anymore, you got to hang out here, all right? Or you're getting NIL money. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm a 3-4 star, 2 deep, 3 deep, whatever guy, and, Brent Venables comes to me, he says, hey, son, you were on scholarship, you were getting a monthly NIL check, but now we're going to increase your monthly NIL check by X amount of dollars, but we're cutting your scholarship. So here's what's going to happen, Jimmy. Jimmy, you're going to have to go down every single month, and you're going to have to pay your tuition like a normal person. I don't know if Jimmy's going to be signing up for that. Jimmy probably going to be hitting the portal. So I don't know how. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know how these scholarships are working out. I don't know how these schools are doing this. But when I look at these numbers, guys, I don't see rosters that are going to get pillaged this summer or this spring in a couple of weeks. I see rosters that are going to have to make some damn room. Okay, so if you're at Ohio State and you lose your job this spring, you would be remiss not to listen. If you're at the University of Georgia and you lose your job this spring, or you lose out on a job and you're an upperclassman, you would be remiss not to look at the portal. Same thing goes for all of these schools that are pinned up. If you're at LSU right now and you're on that 2 deep or you're on that 3 deep, buddy, you got playing time opportunities elsewhere where it doesn't look like you might be. So when I look at these rosters, guys, I'm looking for room. Who's got room to be out here doing the illegal activity this spring? And I don't see a lot of thes big boy players having the room to do so. So my question immediately was like, oh, maybe some of these mid-majors are going to swoop in and get some of these, 2s and 3s from all these other rosters. I talked to some mid-majors this morning. They're in the same battle. We got 90 kids on our roster. We got super seniors left and right. We got guys that don't seem to ever want to leave college football. So I don't know how we're going to – in fact, Coach, we're probably going to have to ask kids to leave this spring more so than we are going out and trying to get guys. But here's what I will tell you is going to happen for sure, without a doubt. Mexican standoffs. You're going to see them this spring. Okay, I'm telling you right now, you are going to see guys hit the portal or announce that they're going into the portal only to hold their current roster's feet to the fire with a raise. I'm getting offered this from Power 5 School A. Either you're matching it or I'm walking. And there's going to be a lot of teams that probably say, okay, you can walk because we're tapped out, right? I would imagine, I don't want to speak for Victoria's Secret's money, but I would imagine Ohio State's probably pushed up on their cap. I would imagine Ole Miss is pushed up on their cap. I would imagine Georgia and Kirby Smart ain't playing this shit this spring. Okay, I would imagine if you're Mexican standoff in your football team, unless that's USC and that guy's got to win this fall, you're probably not going to get your raise. You're probably going to enter the portal and go take that, whatever strong arm deal you got going on. So I don't expect a ton of activity from the big boys. However, there are some schools with some room to play with, particularly in the SEC. Because, guys, you can't hide this information, right? If you're under the limit or massively over the limit of scholarships, it's obvious on your roster. We just go look through it and we say, hey, that 4-star that they signed in 2020, he's probably still on scholarship or else he would be going elsewhere, right? It's just basic common knowledge. So you go look through the depth charts right now and you look through the rosters. I got 3 schools with pretty extensive histories of paying money. All right, and poaching rosters and doing whatever it needs to be done to have a good player acquisition strategy. I got 3 teams with room to make some plays, one of which still currently on, scholarship restrictions, so they don't really count. But Tennessee's sitting at 75 right now, boys. Sitting at 75 scholarships on the roster. However, they have a 5 scholarship ding from Jeremy Pruitt's McDonald Bag Brigade. So you got that going on, but that still leaves about 5 spots to play with this spring for a team, again, who is very, very outspoken about their spending strategy. Okay, so I'd be watching out for Tennessee to be poaching your roster right now. I'd be watching out for Texas A&M. Texas A&M sitting at about 78 right now. I would also be paying very close attention to Missouri, a football team that clearly has a winnable window right now, right? They got a really talented roster. They're sitting at 80. sitting at 80 scholarships. So there's still some room for some of these schools to be out here playing around. But if you're looking, ladies and gentlemen, for who might be poaching your roster, if you're one of these schools that are over the limit right now or close to the limit, or if you're worried that your spending acquisition strategy might not be as aggressive as others, UGA fans, Alabama fans, right? You guys, if you're worried about your roster getting poached, the availability is only in certain spots. So it's pretty clear who's going to be picking you apart this summer and this spring in a couple of weeks. So just pay attention as close as you can to roster limits, and then you might actually find some answers with regard to who has the ability to go out here and mess with your roster. Welcome in, as always. We do indeed have a loaded show for you guys. I want to talk about the law. Where am I at? Hold on. We talked about those last night. My notes are bamboozled. Here we go. I got my welcome in right here. I spy a leader. Boys. I spy a leader in his words and his actions in the SEC at the quarterback position. Figure we ought to talk about that. We're going to set the bar tonight for those USC Trojans out there in LA, moving to the Big Ten this year, so the schedule is going to get a little bit more difficult. Been a while since I dusted off Nostrabeezus. Okay, we're going to make a little prediction here. Hey, watch out. This is probably going to happen in a couple of weeks. Notre Dame's exiting athletic director. You know, he's listed as an athletic director. He operated as an athletic director, but I would almost consider him his own commissioner because he's been in rooms negotiating on behalf of the independent that is Notre Dame in a lot of these college football discussions over the last decade and a half. So he's got a really, really interesting insight on the landscape of college football and where we might be headed. And I thought, if we've got one of these guys willing to sit down and do an interview, we better, read it and bring it to you guys because I think there were some really, really poignant nugs coming out of that. And Billy Napier's ex-players are really, really, really not helping him as of late with some of their words. So we're going to talk about that tonight as well as exiting players are out here taking shots. But welcome in. As I said, we got a great one for you. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, like, subscribe, and rate and reviewing. Numbers last show, 20% of you. 20% of you still hanging out here just milking us for all of our content without hitting that subscribe button. So make sure you're doing that. We are very, very close to 22,000 subscribers. That'll be cool to hit very soon. So make sure you get us there as fast as possible. And also make sure you're running over to prizepicks.com using promo code Brooks. Man, I was telling you guys before the show, one of my favorite things is when you open up Prize Picks and you're like, oh, damn, that hit. Huh. That last one hit, the lock of the day hit, had a nice little balance sitting in my Prize Picks account today. Prizepicks.com, promo code Brooks, you get 100% deposit match, put up to $100, you'll get matched right there instantly with that promo code Brooks. Boys, leadership is loud, man. Leadership is really, really loud, and oftentimes it's actions for me more so than lip service. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big lip service guy, even though sometimes, especially at the quarterback position, you kind of got to get in somebody's ass, maybe use a little bit more of a demonstrative voice. But I think leadership, particularly things like body language are really, really loud. And I when I go to events like the Elite 11, every single year, those individuals, 9 times out of 10, those are going to be the names we talk about, or at least someone in that group is going to be a name, or 3 or 4 of those guys are going to be names that we talk about in the world of college football for a very extended time, right? 3 or 4 years, maybe 5, maybe 6 sometimes nowadays with additional COVID years, right? We're going to be talking about some of those names for a very long time. So I am not hypercritical, but I am hyper aware of everything that's going on out there on those fields when I'm out there. And one of my first kind of initiations to this massive camp and this really, really important scouting event was the Garrett Nussmeier class. I think that's the Brock Vandergrift class as well. That would be class of 2021, right? That would also be the quote unquote COVID class, right? These are the guys that's, recruiting transitions were cut short because COVID hit that March, and then, everything kind of shut down. Guys weren't able to see things, but the Elite 11 went on that year. And it was a very different environment. You had to stay far away from the athletes, weren't able to interview them, do anything like that. But at the very end, the Elite 11's rules kind of ended, and you were allowed to actually be a human for like 2 seconds and be able to talk to some of these young men. And I'd been watching Garrett Nussmeier, right, all week. And I knew at the time he was committed to LSU. I was watching Vandergrift and watching Caleb Williams and watching all these things. But for some reason, my eyes kept getting drawn to Garrett Nussmeier, and it had nothing to do with physical tools, right? I mean, for Christ's sakes, Caleb Williams is standing right there. So it wasn't really, and JJ McCarthy, I think, was in that class as well. So it wasn't even like a physical traits thing for me with Nuss, but it was very apparent that Garrett Nussmeier had a leadership bravado about him, right? Whether it was always being, I know this is cheesy as shit, but intangibles matter, specifically at this position. First off the bus, right? Every single day. Last player, not to leave talking to media every day, but the last player to talk to a coach as he was leaving. Hey, what do I got to get today? What did I do good today? What did I do bad today? How do I get better today, right? During pro days, oftentimes during these pro day events, like one guy will throw and then the rest of the group kind of waits their turn. And then as they go, they kind of just, most of their high school kids, most of them just, once they get done with their pro day, they start dicking around. They start going off to the side, throwing balls again, or talking to their mom, or getting on their phone, texting their girlfriend, whatever. Nussmeier, the entire time, I think he threw like third or fourth that day, the entire time was standing behind his competitors, right, at the Elite 11 event. Hey, man, good ball, good ball, good ball. Come on, come on, come on. Like encouraging his teammates the entire time. Really not even his teammates. They're his competitors, right? And it gotten to the point after 3 or 4 days where I was like, you know what? I'm going to say something. Because I had known he was a coach's son, but this was extended beyond. Like, I texted somebody in the LSU building today. There is a difference between, hey, this is a coach's son who has lived and talks a football life, and then there is a coach's son who lives a football life, like everything to a T, does it the right way. This is one of those guys. And I had to say something after the event. I walked up to him, walked up to his pops. I said, hey, Coach Nussmeier, I just want to let you know, like, I haven't seen a leadership eval like your son this week. Everything done the right way. Showed up, had his own warm-up routine. Like showed up, like was doing his own calisthenics pre-snap. Like just stuff at 17 that guys don't really figure out until they're like 30-year-old vets and pros in the league. And I love, and look, the play is the play. But I love when evals like that, they get to college, they wait around, they sit behind a Heisman winner, and then their first opportunity to get in front of microphones or get in front of any type of environment where we get to hear him again or get to see him again, and it immediately pops off. And look, this isn't video. These are quotes. But I want you to listen to this as an audience and tell me LSU don't have a leader of men running their program right now at the quarterback position. Quote, I think if you asked any of us, this is an article, titled 10 Wins Isn't Enough, claims Garrett Nussmeier. That is not the standard. It is not good enough. Quote, I think if you asked any of us that is what we'll tell you. We don't believe that's the standard anymore. You know, going into year 3 in this system, and not even on the field, but off the field, and how we do things on a daily basis, how we act, how we move around the building, how we do things outside of this building. It's all changed. And we hold ourselves to the standards where we believe, like I said, 10 wins is not enough anymore. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, we have to win a national championship. That's not how we think, but it's about the little things, and it's about doing the little things the right way, and that leads to a championship culture. Everything in these quotes, guys, screams coach's son, but again, it's a guy, I'm telling you, that lives this stuff. And I would imagine if you talk to his teammates and his coaches, man, LSU thinks they have a leader of men leading their program. And by the way, has played really, really good in mop-up duty and even in starting duty against Wisconsin in the playoff game, or in the bowl game. 31 for 45 for 395 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick, and a come-from-behind win, 35-31 against a pretty decent Wisconsin team out of the Big Ten. Thoughts on Nuss? I know you guys have seen him play, but just thoughts on like knowing for a fact that we have a real stern leader and a vocal leader at the quarterback position.
Well, I think that's something that's valuable for him too, is that when you're working in a new quarterback, it probably feels refreshing to get something fresh from the quarterback position. Not to say that Jaden Daniels wasn't this type of leader and he wasn't a leader for that football team, but and the times that I listen to him speak and whatnot, he doesn't strike me as this type of leader, like where it seems like Nussmeier can go in there and he captures a room. Like that is what he's seeking to do. He's seeking to lead the team as a whole. Whereas Jaden Daniels doesn't strike me as that type of personality, which is perfectly fine. I mean, you can still be successful in those situations, but when you're rolling in a guy like Nussmeier, it probably feels good as a team, like those returning guys feeling something fresh coming into that room.
And look, I talked about the physical traits of Nussmeier they'll never stick out. Okay, about 6'2", about $195, got an okay arm. Okay, whereas if you're going to instill confidence in your teammates, you better be one of these guys, right? You better be one of these intangible dudes. Whereas Jaden Daniels is extremely gifted, right? He's first round, top 5 caliber pick gifted. He will be drafted as such. He played as such. He instilled confidence in his players around him through that mechanism, I would imagine. We don't have to be Johnny do everything right because we're Jaden Daniels and we're going to win a damn Heisman and have 5,000 total yards of offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely checks all the boxes that you'd want of the prototypical quarterback, prototypical leader. So it's going to be very fun to watch this season because you'd have to presume he's won the starting role.
Yeah.
Like the way he's answering media questions and things such as that, he is the guy. But it's going to be unfortunate if they do have 10 wins because things are going to look back on this and say, oh, it was all lip service and he wasn't really about it, which, I mean, that's not the case, but the record is the ultimate decider as to how you are as a leader and what you are as a player.
Just reeks of coach. I think Coach Jake Flint, the strength and conditioning staff, have done an outstanding job of expressing that urgency to us. You can't just start that in fall camp. That's not how it works. You can't just pretend that you've been putting in work all offseason at a standard. So it starts now. I mean, it started right after the bowl game. How about that? How about that? That is 20 years of listening to your dad talk football. Dad spent a long time in the NFL. Well respected football mind.
So do you think LSU's going to have to tweak their offense a little bit?
Yes, and from a standpoint of this cat ain't running.
Yeah.
This dude is not going to be running. He's not going to be accounting for backside defensive ends. He's not going to be holding box counts. He's not going to be doing any of that. So, yeah, you're going to become far more of an air raid football team that leans on a decent run game via your running back. I mean, last year it was Jaden Daniels by like 300 yards in terms of leading rusher. I think he had almost 1,000. He had 900 yards, and the next guy was at like 650 last time I checked, if I remember correctly. So don't quote me on that. That's a lot of numbers to remember off the top of my head. But, yeah, you're definitely changing styles, but concepts won't change.
I think it could be refreshing to know, too. I know this was 2 seasons ago, and it's a very small sample size. But when LSU had to work Nussmeier in once Jaden Daniels was injured against Georgia, the offense continued to roll, and they were at least able to adjust on the fly. Now, I know that they had some absurd talent at the wide receiver position that kind of alleviates some of that, but good to know that they were able to kind of adjust themselves.
Jaden Daniels had almost 1,200 yards rushing. He had 1,134 yards rushing, and I was right. The next leading rusher was Logan Diggs at 650 yards. So, yeah, you're a different football team, but passing-wise, you won't be that much different. You'll still chunk it 40 times a game. How did they get that many snaps?
Because their
defense was letting them
score in 5 plays.
They're only taking 64 snaps a game, so yeah, the defense was trash. And that's the thing, though. They're going to have to play a different brand of football this year, and they should be able to, right? There's no way they're as bad defensively as they were last year, just with the coaching staff adjustments that they've made. They went out and hired Mizzou's defensive coordinator, brought in a defensive line coach that's worth a salt as well, and I think they got a linebackers coach in there as well this offseason. So there's been a lot of staff additions and turnover out there at LSU. I think he fired 4 on-field guys last year on the defense.
Yeah, it was like a bloody Sunday. I remember when the first offseason started. It was like he's fired, cleaned house. So, I mean, yeah, you'd think they better be better because, hell, I don't think, as great as the leader Garrett Nussmeier is, I don't think he can do what Jaden Daniels did last season.
No, he cannot. Should be, like you said, though, the only thing I was wondering about is, like, why did they bring A.J. Swan in? That was weird to me. Did they think they just needed quality backup? Because Colin Hurley's the 2025 kid, or 2024 kid, was a 25 kid reclassed in a 24. So he's a 17-year-old freshman there. He is the future at the position. Maybe they just signed AJ because they needed a backup. You would imagine.
I mean, I think they need a backup, and I think AJ Swan got tired of Nashville.
How do you get to? Oh, it's a little bias from you right there. You think AJ Swan got tired of Nashville? No,
I'm just saying, like, tired of being in Nashville.
And he kind of got beat out by Ken Seals, if we're being honest.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, do I want to be a backup at Vanderbilt in Nashville or go to Baton Rouge? And I'm sure you probably got a pay raise as well.
Man, I was about to say, what a tough run for AJ Swan. Get to spend some time as the starting QB in Nashville as a freshman. Get the lure of borderline freshman all SEC. And then you get to kick your feet up and be a backup in Nashville for a year. And then you get to go kick your feet up for 2 years in Baton Rouge and throw some footballs, man. Not a bad life for AJ Swan.
Definitely not a bad life.
Not bad for the cat from Cherokee County High School here in Northwest Georgia. But yeah, no, I spy a leader. Spy a leader in Nuss, and I don't know if we're as physically gifted, but that's okay as long as we make tremendous decisions. There was times, Kelly talked about Jaden Daniels last year before the season about how, man, I want him to. I feel like there's yards left out on the field. I feel like there's some hesitancy with his game so far. There was very little hesitancy in Nussmeier's game from jump. I mean, he walked in against Georgia a couple years ago, and like you mentioned, was willing to sling it, and then you rip it 45 times in a bowl game. Let's rock. You know what I mean? He sounds confident as well about this year. So yeah, leadership be loud every time we get it. Hey man, these Florida transfers now. I almost feel bad for Billy at this point. Because most of these guys that have left him that out here talking shit, he didn't sign them, right? Trevor Etienne was not was he a Billy Napier guy?
I think he was a class of 2021, was he?
Was it back end of Mullen?
No, he's 2 years in.
He signed with Ernest. Ernest talked about him today. So he committed with Ernest Green in that 2022 signing class. So I think he would have maybe been a Billy Napier guy.
Like a hybrid. Like probably recruited by Dan Mullen.
And had to get finished off by had to finish the job with Billy Napier. Yeah, probably. But anyways, these Florida cats, man, they are not helping Billy Napier's case. Trevor Etienne was the first one. He basically said on Tate Ratledge's podcast, it's not Tate Ratledge's podcast, the Real Talk podcast with Tate Ratledge and Brett Thorson, that basically he left Florida because he had two options, right? The option of I'm either the starter on a 7-5 football team or what do you say, a contributor?
He said I'm either a number 2 on a 7-5 team.
Yeah, he said a number 2 on a 7-5 team because they had the Johnson cat, or I'm the number 1 on a national title contender, and that seems like a really easy debate or a really easy decision for me. So boom, he's at Georgia now, obviously in the news for negative purposes as of late. But Etienne was not the only one that left Florida and had some negative words about the University of Florida and their football program. This quote comes from Princely Uman-Milan, who obviously was Florida's best defensive end and edge rusher last year. I believe he led them in sacks and TFLs. He is now at Ole Miss playing for Lane Kiffin and transferred there this offseason. He had this to say about the differences between the two coaching staffs.
Attacking the run game a little bit, but I feel like here I'm getting coached harder for things like that. I feel like at Florida, like the way I was coached, it was kind of like, it was almost as if like they was just telling me to go out there and use my talent, if that makes sense. But here, Coach Lou and Coach Coach Joyner, they really on me about the little things, attacking the run. Coach Lou really goes through the progressions of the drops and the routes that are being run when I have to go into coverage. Like when I was at Florida, it was like they would just tell me, go drop to this area, and I would have to figure out everything else on my own. But here, they go real into depth. I feel like I'm actually getting, developed here.
So there you hear it, right? Basically comparing the two programs. One program was a go play ball program, and another program, being Ole Miss, is much more of this is why we do this. I've heard, and this is, by the way, I don't want to be too hypercritical of Florida, but I'm gonna get there in a second. But explaining the why is like the number one thing for coaches. We explain what we're doing, we explain how we're doing it, and then the last key, the last infinity stone as a coach is players understanding why we do what we do. Okay, so it's one thing to go out there and say, hey, you're dropping into this zone, which is what he's talking about. Florida would say, hey, this is just your drop. Okay, go out there and be a football player. That's fine. That's what we're doing. How we do it, all right, let's be a little more refined. Okay, let's make sure our technique and our drop's proper. Let's make sure our alignment's proper. Okay, let's make sure we get to the right depth when we drop. Let's make sure we know where we're dropping at the right time. Right? That's how we do it. Okay, but why we do what we do is what makes plays on Saturday. It's what changes the inches, right? We're dropping to this. This is how we do it. And here's why we're doing it. We are doing it right here in this situation because film or study tells us that out of this formation, this guy likes this guy likes this, and you're going to be here to make this play. This is where you need your eyes. Guys, this is like the next coaching line. And here's the first thing I thought about. This makes the position coach look really, really bad at Florida. I believe they made some changes. I don't want to be 100% positive there. I believe they've made some changes at the room that he's talking about specifically. But more importantly, this is an oversight issue, which continues to pop up at Florida. Things that just get overlooked because people are looking elsewhere, or they have too much going on, or they have too much to think about. and I look at a head coach that's very young, and I specifically look at a defensive coordinator who I love, by the way. I think Austin Armstrong is going to be a great football coach for a long time in the world of college football, maybe beyond. I think he's brilliant. Okay. I think other people think he's brilliant too, by the way. Kirby Smart tried to hire him immediately when he left that the last time he had a transition staff. So I think football minds that are really smart think Austin Armstrong's really smart. But let's be honest. He's a very, very young defensive coordinator, perhaps one of the youngest in the sport. This sounds like oversight to me. This is a bad mark on the Austin Armstrong regime in my mind, just from a surface perspective, because, man, this is your job to make sure these rooms are being coached up to the utmost, right? To the utmost highest standard. We can't have any type of oversight where a football player who, by the way, at times last year, I think it's fair to say Princely didn't necessarily look lost, but he didn't look 100% confident and fast in his play. And that's like everything defense is. So, guys, I don't know how you took these comments. I don't know how you took these things, but to me, it looks like yet another example of Florida having an area of oversight where they didn't coach it up to the point to where you're supposed to. You know what I'm saying?
Why does stuff like this keep happening at Florida? It's almost like Billy Napier wasn't ready to become a head coach, but he was a head coach and a successful one at Lafayette for 3 years.
I don't think you understand when you go from Louisiana Lafayette to Florida. I think you can mentally quantify it, but it's not real until you get there,
right? Of
just how overwhelming it can be, just how many things you have to pay attention to, just how many different events, talking points, recruiting pitches, NIL collective meetings, all the things that these guys have to do that is outside of coaching. That if you don't have the proper people around you to help you pick up the slack that you're now missing from a coaching perspective, they're just going to go by the wayside. And that's constantly what we're seeing, I feel like, at Florida.
Yeah, I do feel like that Billy Napier's biggest issue since he's gotten there, along with all the other things, is he's always been trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And it's starting to bite him in the ass more and more now. And I think this is a big example of it.
Princely talked about the coaching at Florida like you hear about if you go play for your AAU team, It's just, all right, boys, lace them up and we're going to go out there. Like, we're just going to go hoop. That's all we're doing. And that's very different than what you have to do to run a successful college football program. And, I mean, it makes sense. You know, I think at first when I heard this quote, I'm like, well, this kind of feels like what we always hear about transfer kids, about like, well, I feel like I'm actually getting developed here. Like, I feel like I finally found what I've been searching for this entire time. But then when you think back at like watching Florida throughout their entire season last year and even before that, it was these kids look out of sort. Like, there feels like there's no organization on both sides of the football, whether it be special teams or whatever. It just feels unorganized. And so it kind of aligns with what Princely's saying about it.
I think, you know, it's a byproduct of, I think, really, really talented young football coaches who might be slightly overwhelmed. And as a football fan base down there at Florida, I'm not even going to say I don't know. I think I know that they're not going to be patient enough to let this guy have his growing pains. They're not going to sit around and wait for this guy to figure it out through hardened lessons like this.
Well, I mean, you're on year 3 now. Shouldn't you stop having growing pains like these?
Yeah, I would imagine.
I mean, like, I understand that you got to give someone time to get their feet running, but at this point, it's like things need. What is the rule we have around here? 3 years?
Yeah.
I mean, you're on year 3 now, and you're having problems that first-year coaches, some don't even have. So, I mean, this isn't good for Billy.
It is. I mean, yeah, it just continues to be. It feels like there's continuing to be more unanswered questions at Florida than there were when he originally got there. Like, after year 1, it felt like there were some unanswered questions, but you're like, well, we still got 2 years for you. But now there feels like more questions are rising, and that just keeps on piling up. There doesn't feel like there's much continuity around this program yet. But, I mean, it also feels like, I don't know if your options are expanding.
And they're walking into a hard, like a impossible schedule on a downtick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're 6-7 with a first-round quarterback, and then you're 5-7, and then you got the hardest schedule in the country. So it's really hard to imagine I'm not gonna throw dirt on his grave, but Florida fans already have, it seems like.
Well, I mean, like, it's. When Dan Mullen got fired, there was one glaring problem with Florida, and that was why the gap was getting bigger and bigger between teams like Georgia and Alabama, and that was Dan Mullen completely disregarded recruiting, and the roster as a whole suffered because of that. And when your roster as a whole suffers, you can't X's and O's your way out of beating Georgia and beating Alabama and beating these top teams. Now that Billy Napier's there, I feel like there's even more problems than just, hey, recruiting's not great. he's done his part in recruiting, but on the field side, it's not going well.
I feel like Billy Napier is really good at focusing in on one task at a time. And if he is able to do that, then he's really good at his job. Like when it comes to the offseason and it's during the summer, like we saw this last year, when Billy Napier is tasked with just focusing on recruiting, Florida can get the job done on the trail. I mean, we saw the run that they went on last summer where they were just bringing in recruit after recruit after recruit, and they were getting kids signed in that class. And it seemed like maybe this was going to be a turning point for Florida. I feel like at times when he has to hyper-focus on just one task, he does really well. But then when he gets into the season and it's time to be a head coach and we need to delegate and we need to spread ourselves around this entire football team, that's when loose screws start popping up and things just kind of unspiral for him.
The first sign from his competitors that he was in over his head was, and I know social media got to it and they made a bunch of jokes about it, but that staff photo or that team photo where the staff's twice as large, 3 times as large as the actual roster, you know, a lot of people in the Florida fan base at that time, they were like, man, we're finally dedicated, right? We're putting assets and resources into this sport, and we're back. We're going to be back. We're going to spend money in NIL. We're going to be here. We're going to be here. We're going to be here. We're investing. Look at our staff. Look how big it is. And then you call around the SEC and they're like, that's not what you do here. That's not how this approach works at its best. At its finest, you are a smaller staff with information that flows in a tight-knit group, right? If you are a great recruiting program, your position coaches are your voices out on the trail. Not some recruiting assistant, not some like third-rate, 22-year-old recruiting assistant that calls and says, hey, how you doing, son? How's everything going? No. You got to be out here grinding. It's got to be Todd Hartley calling the 5-star tight end. It's got to be Trey Scott calling the defensive lineman, right? It's got to be, whoever it is. It's got to be, give me an Alabama position coach off the top of your head. No, that's the wrong group because they just hired a whole new Washington staff from us. Womack. It's got to be Kane Womack, right? It's got to be somebody that's important out there, not somebody that's just some recruiting analyst, right? Some recruiting staffer. And it's great that you can do that, but there's a lot of leaks in that building. There's a lot of misinformation in that building. There's a lot of somehow, some way, there's still a lot of trickle down, a lot of stuff that gets passed through, right? That doesn't get picked up on, like this kind of example right here with, hey, just go play ball. Just go play ball. Just go be a ball player. And from one of your players, that being, or one of your ex-players, that being your kind of coaching strategy in this conference, that's wild.
Now, to play devil's advocate, I mean, that could also
could be cap or whatever.
It's not even cap, just taken out of context where it's like, hey, don't overthink this, just go play ball. Something like that where, I mean, I really don't. I'd like to believe that an SEC position coach isn't telling a player, hey, just go play football. It doesn't matter. We don't have a scheme for you. So I feel like that might be an exaggeration. I don't think that's exactly what happened. But nonetheless, it's not a good look for Billy Napier at all.
I feel like, to me, that Billy Napier just doesn't feel like he's the face of Florida football right now. I mean, we're going into year 3, and it just doesn't feel like he's taken over that program and he's established himself at the top of the hill. And I don't know whether that's because of some of maybe the comments that he makes in his press conferences and people don't take him seriously, but it doesn't feel like he's walked into that program and he's established this is Billy Napier's program and we are the Florida Gators. It just feels like they're the Florida Gators and they got a bunch of people on their staff, and maybe it's because he's hired so many people on their staff, and maybe it's because there's so many outside factors going into this program. But I feel like in order to have success in the SEC, you really got to implement yourself as the head factor of your program, and I think he's failed to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest issue, and I think that's why I personally, I hate saying this, but I think his days are numbered at Florida. Because you look at this 2024 schedule, like, it's not going to get any better. I mean, the fan base is already kind of fed up with you. From what you've talked about, like, media around, it's kind of like, hey, this guy might not be
he didn't do a very good job of understanding that we're going to kind of be bad, so I better make some friends of these dudes.
Right.
Like when you walk into a situation where you feel good you're going to win, you can kind of be whatever you want towards the media. And when you're walking into a situation, you know who did a great job of this? Josh Heupel did a tremendous job. Every single media member in Tennessee loves that guy. They will never speak poorly of him. And his fan base will die for him right now. You know why? Because the media has talked about him tremendously. And he's done a great job. He's won a lot of football games. He's recruited well. He's got all the collective behind him. He's done a great job. Okay? But the first thing he did was like, hey, media, y'all want to come in junior day? Come on. Come see who we're recruiting. Y'all want to come into summer camps? Come on up here. Let's talk. Let's see what you guys got going on. You know what I mean? Like, Guess who's never going to speak poorly of Josh Heupel? Tennessee media reporters. Guess who's out here already dogging Florida, Billy Napier? Florida beat reporters. That dude was getting grilled at every press conference he had this year. He wasn't getting softballs. You know why? Because you were kind of a butthole when you first got there.
What's it going to take for him to, for lack of a better term,
8 games.
Save his job?
He's got to win 8 games, and it's impossible. Look at the schedule. It's impossible. But you got to win 7 or 8 games, and it's got to look like some of these holes are getting filled. Okay, you gotta stop running 8 men out. It wasn't 10, it was like 8 or 9 guys out on punt team. You can't do this shit, right? You can't run 7 guys out on field goal block. It's impossible. You can't do that. You can't call timeouts because for the second time in a row, you ran 10 guys out in the offensive huddle. You can't do that. All right, those kind of things of just we're completely helpless or we don't have control of our program on Saturdays. You can't let that happen. Those things got to get cleaned up while also winning football games because my question becomes if you fire Billy Napier and you go through a head coaching process hiring again, do you get to keep DJ Lagway? Because Florida fans will tell me my whole future as a Florida fan is banking on DJ Lagway being great.
I mean, probably not, no.
You better I would imagine the collective becomes the biggest determining factor of whether Lagway stays or not.
For sure.
Right? NIL and whether or not they can bundle though. Do you just push all your chips in on keeping Lagway at that point?
I mean, yeah, but even
and let the rest of the roster deteriorate?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, is that a smart business move then?
Does he even want to stick around at that point? Because I have no more assets around me.
Well, like, not even that. Like, do you want to invest in one guy for who's, let's be fair, hasn't proven anything yet? For all we know, DJ Lagway could be a bust. I mean, do you want to spend 60% of your NIL budget on one guy when you don't know how it's going to be to let the other roster around you deteriorate? And oh, by the way, when you let that happen, your team's going to get worse. Like, just because you have a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels on your team doesn't mean success. Just ask LSU and USC the last 2 years.
That's a good point right there. All right. Been a while since I dusted off on Nostrabeezus. You know what I mean? Feel a little inkling. Feel like I ought to predict the future. And that's what I'm going to do right here. For those of you who don't remember, Connor Weigman, Texas A&M starting quarterback, looked great last year to start the season. Great, really good. What would y'all say?
Really good.
Really good?
Really good.
I'll borderline great because you know me, I'm a traits guy. As traitsy as they get, he's got it, right? He got some juice on him. 1%er, okay? Really, really good football player. Got hurt last year, and then Texas A&M started spot playing a bunch of young quarterbacks, one being Jalen Henderson. Didn't look bad. I think he completed about 67% of his passes, averaged about 280 yards passing per game and about 50 yards rushing. So kind of one of these dual threats, if those still exist. I think everyone's kind of a dual threat nowadays. Some just are better runners than the rest. And then, of course, the last year's freshman, Marcel Reed. Georgia fans will remember him. He was a highly touted recruit when Todd Monken was here at the quarterback position. Committed to Ole Miss, decommitted from Ole Miss, recommitted to Texas A&M, played in the bowl game, and I believe had 395 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. Looked great in their bowl game this year. And they entered this spring, presumably, in a quote-unquote open quarterback competition. The problem being is Connor Weigman has not been available, or at least 100% available. Connor Weigman's still rehabbing and coming back from his injury. And here's the quote from Mike Elko today in the media. Quote, "He'll be able to work efficiently as a pocket passer. I don't know how well he'll be able to truly run around yet. He still hasn't quite been fully out there doing agility work and those types of things." So not available, but still going out there, going through reps. Even if they got to roll the damn dude out in a wheelchair to install the offense, they're going to do so. That's all great news, and that's all fine and dandy. The problem is the other two guys, based off what they've put on tape and based off their recruiting profiles, particularly Marcel Reed, coming out of high school, buddy, these two guys are not going to stick on your roster if you automatically have a starter, which he automatically has a starter. He reveals that information right here in this next quote. Quote, "Connor's going into the spring as the number one guy, but we've also had 2 other quarterbacks play very effectively, Jalen Henderson at the end of the season and then Marcel Reed in the bowl game. So like every position across the board, there's competition this spring, and Connor certainly needs to be out there and be a part of it." Buddy, how in the world do you have a competition if you know one of them's your number one guy and he ain't even going to be a participant this spring except for going out there and throwing routes on air? You don't have a competition. What you have is 2 football players that right now, I guarantee you, right now, Marcel Reed and Jalen Henderson are fielding phone calls, or their agents are. I guarantee it. Right now, Nostrabeezus predicts Texas A&M going to have some quarterback departure in that quarterback room this spring.
I think it makes no sense for Mike Elko to do this, just to go ahead and make it seem like you've already tabbed your number one starter, because bringing in a new head coach is the perfect reason to justify opening up a quarterback battle.
Just lie.
Or just lie for the matter of fact. But even then, you shouldn't have to, because you being the new head coach is a perfect reason to justify opening up a quarterback battle. Like, I want to see what all three of you bring to the table. I know what you did last year, and because of those reasons, that's why we're going to treat this like an actual quarterback battle. We're not going to go ahead and tab a guy. Like, I feel like this is a bad introduction to Mike Elko.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I can't think off the top of my head of a quarterback or a coach who's coming in his first year and is like, I know who my guy is right away. He's the one. Even the fact that he's not on the field right now doesn't matter. He's our guy. That's what all the indications are right now. And it's very weird to see that, because like Jonathan said, it's really not a good introduction for that. And it's kind of hindering you from having a competition and exercising options.
You don't gain any advantage by telling the world that Connor Weigman's your one. You don't gain any advantage. You gain a tremendous amount of advantage of surviving this through December.
Now, I mean,
keeping these guys interested until the fall and well into the fall, to where you have a quality backup situation. Because if you don't, you're gonna be walking out a walk-on or Jalen Henderson, and if Jalen Henderson gets hurt for some reason, like you're down to a walk-on. So like, whoever ends up leaving, you get what I'm saying. So like, I think you're just opening yourself up to exposure here at saying these comments.
Now, I mean, are we laying out counting out the fact that maybe behind closed doors, Connor Weigman and Mike Elko had a conversation like, hey, I'll stay here, but I am the guy. Like, is that possible? Do you think that happened?
I don't think Connor Weigman had to do any of this. I don't think Connor Weigman had to go in there and say, hey, if I'm not the guy, I'm leaving, because I think he already assumes he is the guy, which is in my opinion, the whole purpose of like, the whole reason, and it always relates back to Georgia, but it's a prime example. The whole reason Kirby Smart didn't say anything last year during the spring, they knew who their guy was. Everyone in the beat knew who their guy was. Even though we kept talking about how good Brock Vandagriff's doing, because Brock Vandagriff was doing good. But everybody knew Carson Beck was the guy. But he didn't come out and say it until September, when I pinned him down on it the week before the damn game. So you don't have to do this.
No, you don't. I guess the only thing I'm thinking is that maybe like coaches who come in want to bring in, quote, their guys. And that, I mean, the transfer portal is perfectly allowed coaches to do that. Go, oh, I'll take this quarterback with me. Lincoln Riley is a perfect example of this. So maybe Connor Weigman was like, hey, I want the guarantee that I am your guy.
And maybe it's also the fact that him being in a new position at Texas A&M, maybe he was a little hesitant to just come in here and maybe piss off a Connor Weigman or anybody else. Now, of course, you've probably kind of pissed off two other guys in your quarterback room, but maybe he was a little hesitant to just kind of risk that maybe losing Connor Weigman by saying, like, you're not our number one guy yet. Like, I need to re-see everything from you.
Some complacency avoidance, right? It's not a bad idea. Anytime the word chooch gets brought up, sometimes the chat wants to pop in there talking about when's the chooch competition between Aaron and I. Over on Snaps, they broke down Aaron's Missouri tape. Do you think we should break down my bubble tape? Let you guys give an unbiased opinion on what your boy put on tape. 2 throws. I gave 2 throws just like Aaron. Maybe compare and contrast. I'm looking at you as a producer because you guys get the videos ready. Maybe we do this. Maybe like a compare and contrast between what Aaron put on tape and what I put on tape. Because I'm going to tell you right now, based off just video evidence, I got a more lively arm. I don't think that's a debate.
I don't know. I'd have to see them both.
You must not follow me on Twitter. You seem surprised every time we talk about.
No, I've seen the video of you throwing. I've seen that video. I just haven't seen the one of Aaron Murray.
Oh yeah, Murray tagged me in some stuff that he threw at Missouri Spring Day. A spin 2 over there for me, but give it a nice big picture for him like we normally do on the film study. Let me see that sucker. Oh yeah, man, we out here spinning this. We out here spinning. Okay, understand? That's a dot. That's an absolute dot and a drop. I was pissed off about that one.
It's a good ball.
And this ball. Tell me what you think about this. Because there's a coaching point for sure. Ball's late.
Ball's late.
But
ball's late and he had to come a little back to it.
Can I make an excuse? Okay, I don't know what they're running.
We're going to do that now.
No, I don't know what they're running right there. Okay? They're just taking off. I'm taking into a 3-step drop, getting my feet underneath me and patting the football, waiting for them to break. So, yeah, that ball could have been thrown a little bit earlier, but out there at the bubble, working in little double moves, all that good stuff. So you really got to hold it till the last second and just let it eat when you get a chance. But from a velo perspective, I got Buddy by a mile. I don't even think it's going to be close. The question is going to be about accuracy, about how comfortable I feel in a 5-step, how comfortable I feel in a quick game footwork situation, 3 steps, play action, all that good stuff. But I think Buddy's arm is fried.
Maybe we'll see.
You got to pull up.
Do we have a date for this yet?
No, because he keeps ducking me. I think we're going to try to get something scheduled very, very soon, but he keeps ducking me. He texted me yesterday and was talking about getting something on the books, and I told him we can do anything but Sundays because your boy's got a Little League championship to win on Sunday afternoon, so we can't be doing that. You can just have Buddy zoom in on that over there if you can. Take 2 and just
figure out
a
how to
tad.
get this volume down because I know it's blasting the audience.
Just mute the desktop.
And I can't find. Oh, it is muted.
Oh. Well, then mute the button on Streamlabs. Can you not do that? Is it blasting them?
Yeah, it is.
All right, my bad. Don't worry about it then. But anyways, homeboy's cooked. Okay? So there you go. Just a brief little sidebar on Aaron Murray going to get cooked by a former D2 offensive lineman. All right, let's talk about this Notre Dame story. Okay. Notre Dame's he's exiting athletic director. Okay, his name is Jack Swarbrick. What a name!
That sounds like a Notre Dame name.
Strong, right? It sounds like rich and powerful.
That's a good Catholic boy.
Yeah, Jack Swarbrick. He's the exiting athletic director at Notre Dame, and he's been the athletic director at Notre Dame for the last 15 years. And I was telling the guys before the show, I think this is very important. I think I might have mentioned this to start the show. This guy and Jack Swarbrick has negotiated on behalf of Notre Dame for the last 15 years during not arguably during the most hectic and unsettling times of college football. And he did so during the time where Notre Dame was the only powerful independent school, and they were acting as basically they were their own conference as a massive independent that everyone wanted a part of. So when it came to college football playoff realignment, when it came to conference realignment, when it came to any major decision, what you boys goofing about?
Oh, Georgia's just blowing a lead in basketball.
Classic case. Any major decision that has happened over the last 15 years of college football, this dude has been front and center in it. And he is walking out of the sport, and on his way out, he's giving the deets. He's spilling some beans on his way out. So I did the reading so you don't have to. And I got some quotes that I want to bring to you. This is an article by Dennis Dodd today in CBS Sports. Dennis does a great job. And he had an opportunity to send some questions back and forth and really just have a conversation with AD Swarbrick today. And like I said, I think we get some really, really good stuff out of this. Like this right here. This is him on the separation of college football from everything else. Dennis Dodd says, you mentioned a need for, quote, academic integrity in whatever major sport or major college sports becomes. Is that possible? Basically, is it possible for there to be maintained an academic importance and an academic integrity with the realignment that's inevitably coming? Quote, is this activity going to continue to be integrated into the university, or is it going to be something separate? Increasingly, forces are pulling it away. Instead of it letting happen on a de facto basis, we ought to be asking the question and answering it. So we had this conversation in 2000. This is Dennis Dodd talking now. We had this conversation in 2015 when you had a vision of 2 collegiate athletic associations, one that adheres to traditional collegiate model and one that is more of a semi-professional model. It's basically what our man from the NCAA has proposed, by the way. And Swarbrick says, I wouldn't rule it out. I've never ceased to be amazed at how much money drives decision-making. At some point, you've got to think some number of universities are going to say, we are going back to a model that recognizes the athlete's rights, but is integrated into the university. So what he's basically saying there, guys, is like he sees a world where eventually there is some separation, but he also sees a world where some of these schools are like, I'm not about that. I'm going to just maintain these academic ties that we've always had.
Yeah, that's the one that stuck out to me the most when I read the article. I think that kind of gives a little bit of insight that maybe it's not this big uniformity between every single college program that we're all going to go in and jump on top of this. And I think that was kind of understood that not everybody is, of course, going to see eye to eye. I mean, when you have this many football programs making a big decision, they're not all going to want to do the same thing. But I think it should sound a little good to the college football fan that some of these are going to recognize the athlete and be integrated to the university like you just mentioned.
Yeah, keeping the athlete within the confines of the university and kind of keeping those intertwined, I think is
at least affiliated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like at least affiliated with the university. Go ahead.
No, I just think that's probably the most important factor of college athletics as a whole. Like when you separate those two entities, you're completely destroying the fabric of the sport. It's no longer college athletics, and it's no longer what makes it so special.
Yeah, I think the importance of going to a semi-professional model without the collegiate ties, it will fail. I believe that. I believe that if you just do a semi-pro league, within a decade, the ties aren't going to be there. We're not going to be out here with the passion that we currently do. I don't believe it to be the case. But he continues. Did you find anything else? I thought his thoughts about the FSU and Clemson departure and lawsuits were quite revealing. Dennis Dodd says, that begs the question, with all of this realignment, where does it stop, particularly with Florida State and Clemson wanting out of the SEC? Swarbrick responds, my crystal ball is cloudier than it's ever been. That's saying something. I don't see a lot of momentum towards further realignment right now. There are some schools that, if they made a move, might change that. But frankly, we're probably first among that. I think it's a typo. We're probably first among that, but we're not likely to. I don't see the catalyst right now. The Big Ten and the SEC have the assets they need to position themselves for the next media negotiation. I understand the ACC has disgruntled members, but I'm not sure there are better options for them. Quote, the ACC's legal position is a very strong one. We hear a lot of talk and a lot of lip service from people in the national media, particularly from Florida State's end and Clemson's end, like, hey, they got bargaining power. Private equity is going to get involved. They're going to pay all these legal expenses. They might even pay out these buyouts. Schwarbrick's saying, nah, that's cap. Like that's all just fabricated lies and lip service. They don't have an opportunity to breach these contracts.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he was like, I don't really see too much realignment happening. It seems like things are kind of settled for the time being, but specifically mentioning FSU and Clemson, I know that he wasn't the one that mentioned it, but specifically talking about the ACC, because that seems like the next big domino to fall is those two teams leaving the ACC and potentially going to either the Big Ten or SEC. I think that's interesting to know that maybe things are a little further out than what we think. Maybe that Clemson and FSU don't have as much power in this scenario that we think that they do.
I think they might be further out than people are expecting to be. Like, I don't think we're going to get something within the next year or so, but I also don't think that the stronghold that the ACC has on these teams is as strong as everyone thinks. I mean, 2 years ago, if you said, hey, the Pac-12 is probably going to collapse entirely, just out from underneath you within the span of 6 months, people would have been like, that's not going to happen. Pac-12's got their own TV rights. Everything's fine there. That's not going to happen. I mean, here we are now. We're in a Power 4 with 12-team playoffs. So this idea that the ACC is so strong and so robust that it's going to be able to hold on to Clemson and Florida State seems a little far-fetched to me, honestly.
So you're not buying this?
Not really, no. I think he's right in that it's not coming within the next few months, within the next maybe even 2 years. But at some point, Florida State and Clemson are going to leave the ACC sooner than the ACC is going to be ready to let them go.
You know what we haven't talked about much is the idea that the Big Ten and the SEC might look at Clemson. What if they look at Clemson and Florida State and like, we don't want you?
Why wouldn't they?
This is what I'm with you. Why wouldn't they? Right? Be it as big as you want. Take all the big names. Bring them all in. But this quote right here. The Big Ten and the SEC have the assets they need to position themselves for the next media negotiation. He's under the belief that the SEC and the Big Ten are happy with what they have. And who would know more and who would know better than the guy that just left the biggest independent in the freaking country? You don't think the Big Ten and the SEC have tried to proposition this cat to come into their conference?
Probably.
You don't think this dude knows more about whether or not these conferences are up for a new additional member than this guy? No one knows more than this guy with regards to this particular discussion of conference realignment. He's gotten approached by all these fucking Notre Dame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Fair point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that the SEC or the Big Ten are actively reaching out to Florida State and Clemson and saying, hey, please join this conference. Please help us make this Super League. But you're telling me that if those two teams came on the board to tomorrow, that the SEC and Big Ten wouldn't do everything they could in the power to not sweep them up?
Probably. I mean, from a power place.
Yeah, I think it would be.
You don't want to let them go to the Big 12.
Right. It's more of an opportunity thing because I think the way it seems is that Clemson and Florida State are actively trying to leave the ACC. They want out. Now, whether or not the Big Ten and the SEC are actively trying to get Clemson and Florida State is a different story. But when Clemson and Florida State become available, there's no way that the SEC and Big Ten sit on their hands with that. They're going to swoop them up immediately.
I think it's all just loud loud children screaming and wailing about being upset that they didn't get, their trophy at the end of the year. That's what I think. And like the comments say, Tyler Mash mentions right here, the grant of rights deals, the grant of rights that they signed it's not just about buying your way out of the conference. The conference owns the right to broadcast your television rights for the next 2036. Is that what it was? They got you, Bubba. You can't televise games. You can go play in the Big Ten. That's fine. Your games aren't going to be able to be televised. That's nuts. That's what the grant of rights is, and that's the one they're going to have to massively pay to buy themselves out of. Sounds like Blue Cane's out here lighting it up.
Did you see, before we move on, did you see the shot that Dodd sent in like the first 2 paragraphs? So here, I'll just read it to you. Swarbrick departs having overseen the most national championships of any AD in program history, and then in parentheses, though none in football, of course. Just adding that in.
Sounds like a buddy.
No, it sounds like that's the type of comment you make after you've gotten the quotes.
For sure.
You know what I mean? That was written as the article was put together. The other, I thought, noteworthy part, do you have anything else? I'm going to talk about this House versus Hill comments that he had right here. We talked about House versus Hill last week, and it's very important that House versus Hill is the biggest of all of these things. It's coming down in, I think, 8 to 9 months. It will ultimately, based on what I've read and what I understand, it's looking like it's going to be the bargaining decision and the kind of settlement, between all of this stuff. And that is the case between, I believe, Matt House is his name. He's a swimmer out there at Arizona State. And he is the chief plaintiff in that suit between the NCAA and him as a swimmer. And again, it could ultimately reestablish what it means to be a college athlete. So what's the next pressure point, Dennis Dodd asked. The House versus NCAA trial is less than a year away. Swarbrick says, that's right. There's got to be a future model that everyone can live with. While settlement discussions are, of course, about money for past activities, they're also focused on what the future model looks like. I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill discussing that. We don't need any more catalysts to encourage us to get that model defined. But basically what he's saying is this House versus Hill, this House versus NCAA, lawsuit could ultimately be kind of the settlement grounds for what the future model ultimately holds moving forward. They continued, what is that effort on the Hill? NCAA President Charlie Baker and scores of commissioners and ADs are lobbying for some kind of help from Congress. We've seen this in droves, right? Whether it be Nick Saban, whether it be Charlie Baker, whoever it is, going to Capitol Hill and saying, please, Congress, give us some type of regulation here, give us some type of help. And every single time Congress looks at the NCAA or looks at Nick Saban and they're basically like, we're not helping you. We think you're a load of shit. We think you're a violation of antitrust laws. We think you are a charade for all of the athletic directors and all the universities that you represent. That's what we think of you. And no, we are not helping you. Okay, so that's what they tell him every single time. And Swarbrick confirms that right here. It says, I don't think anybody has high expectations in a presidential election year, but I must say there's a clear understanding and sense of urgency. We may not get to legislation until the beginning of next year. Okay, everyone knows we're in an election year, and everyone knows it's hard enough to get Congress to do anything, let alone or agree on anything, let alone right now. So I don't think Congress is going to be any help here, boys. I think we're going to have to get some type of settlement out of the House versus Hill discussions and lawsuits that are out there. So, AD Swarbrick right there giving you a lot of pertinent and important news. We got a whole nother hour of local topics coming up right now. Play that sound. Music.
Welcome into Talk the Dog, the show where we find a bone to pick and a take to give. These are not hot takes. These is dog takes. Can I talk that dog? What's up? You really like that? Let's shut up and grind some tape.
Welcome back from our intermission as Brooks walks back into the room.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk That Dog. We finna talk that dog. Yeah, man, just a quick potty break. I'm just hydrated, getting ready for my conversational cardio that we're gonna hit late tonight. Is it too cold outside? Is it still raining?
Probably.
It's probably still raining.
All
Yeah.
right, we might hit it in a raincoat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Gonna be sweating anyways.
Fair.
You want to spray the alpha around the neighborhood? Just run around tits out in 50-degree rain and weather.
Spray the alpha around.
Spray the alpha.
neighborhood.
Just let the alpha loose, man. Just
I don't
let
know if
everybody know I'm a daggum dog out in these streets.
Is that why you do it?
Yeah, that's what I do. I want to spray my alpha all around the neighborhood. Hey, we got a great local hour for you guys tonight. Kirby spoke to the media today. We're going to give you the rundown of that. The Hoop Dogs. Shouts out to Hoop Dog. They just won against Ohio State. We're going to rank the rooms tonight. There are 9 position groups at the University of Georgia. We're going to rank them 1 through 9 tonight. Stick around for that one. We have questions that we still have following, 6 practices. We're about a third of the way. We're a little over a third of the way through spring ball, and we still have questions left to be answered. We're going to play a little Georgia trivia tonight, like this one right here. Boys, when was the last time Georgia threw for 50 or fewer yards in a game?
So 50 or less in a game. It's got to be in before the 2000s.
It is
right?
not. It is recent. Very recent.
50 or fewer? Is it
Oh. 2019 Kentucky versus Georgia.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Also, one of my favorite takes of all time and favorite rants. I came on Monday after that and said, this is bullshit. You cannot play offense like this and expect to beat Florida. Bang. What happened? Didn't score enough against Florida. So can't play Kentucky like you're gonna need to, or you can't play Kentucky in a fashion that will not beat Florida 2 weeks from that. So good one right there. So we're gonna play a little dogs trivia.
I think you're talking about 2020.
No, it's 2019.
No, it was 2019.
It's 2019.
They beat Florida in 2019.
Well, you're talking about you cannot win in the postseason is what you said.
Correct.
You cannot go and beat a team like LSU.
Either way, it was a great take, and
Yes.
that game was a classic sit on the football kind of football game.
That was that
for
awful ass rain game. I remember just a monsoon in Athens.
And then 2020, you followed up the next year against Kentucky with another snoozer.
It was a 17 to. It was like 10 to 3s. And
It was
White
One
scored
of
the only touch.
Stetson's worst games.
Yeah.
All right, so there's that. We got football trivia coming to you guys tonight. But most importantly, every time Kirby gets in front of a microphone, we find things to learn and we find things to talk about. I always go into these things with preconceived questions, things that I'm curious about, things that I want to know, like the one that we found in Discord today. Shout out to the Discord family, patreon.com/Brooks Austin. If you're looking for a place to spend your days and evenings talking a little Georgia football, join us over there. Proposed it to the Discord. Hey, if there was one thing you wanted to know from Kirby Smart today, what would it be? Don't often do this. Don't farm my workout to the audience very often, but I felt it necessary to do so today for some reason. Got a lot of, hey, ask him the 5-finger condiment questions. Got him a lot of, hey, will you hire me questions, jokes, and things like that. Our guy OG Zay in the chat today put in a good one. He basically wanted to know, have y'all ever had a guy that was just an absolute standout in spring practice? Something clicked, something just, you figured it out. The guy figured it out, and then it rolled over into the fall. And who would be some examples of that during your time here? Who basically are the spring legends for the University of Georgia and guys that have turned it over into the fall? This is the sound of Kirby answering that question. And I felt, he gave us a pretty good one. Didn't give me the names that I wanted from this year's roster, but gave me some names of guys who have popped in years past.
Man, it's hard to say. It's like on a continuum. I wish there was somebody I could think of. I thought Carson had a really good spring last year because he, took more of the ones reps than he ever had, and then he had a really good fall. But I fully expected that to happen with him. Dylan Bell last year had a really good spring, and thought he had a good season. A couple of the young linebackers we've had where they had good springs and then jump forward to that. I mean, there's a lot of guys I think having good springs out there right now, but only time will tell whether that turns into a great fall.
You're not a fiend. You're not a fiend like me, baby. We're back. Mm-hmm. Hello. Hey, love that clip right there. Love hearing about Carson having a great spring. Mentioned the young linebackers last year. Dylan Bell had a great spring last year. If you were to do it based off sourcing, Colby Young gonna have 1,400 yards this year. You know what I mean? Like, good God.
I heard he had a catch a couple of days ago that was just insane.
Yeah.
In the back of the end zone.
Gonna be doing it. You know what I mean? If you're just taking it off of, damn, this guy's having a great spring. Colby Young. Who's some other names that keep popping?
Dom Lovett keeps popping.
Dom Lovett keeps popping. Roger Robinson has had a good spring. We kind of knew that one was coming as well. Michael Morris having a massive spring this year. Daniel Calhoun playing well. JJA is a freshman playing well. So yeah, there's some names, man, that have already kind of popped up. And Kirby talked about some guys in that year's past. He spoke about Ja'Cory Thomas, or was asked about Ja'Cory Thomas, because Ja'Cory spoke to the media today. We'll talk about him in just a second. And I thought it was interesting to hear Kirby talk about how they recruited him as a height, weight, speed guy. And if you remember, if you were on patreon.com/Brooks Austin at the time, we would have told you that Ja'Cory was a Muschamp take. Okay. Muschamp would do this every once in a while where they bring kids in to work out and just flabbergasted with the cat. And they're like, all right, well, Muschamp likes him, so we're going to offer him. And not only are we going to offer him, it's a Muschamp guy, so we're going to take him if he wants to come here. They offer Ja'Cory Thomas, I think June 21st. I think within 19 days he had committed to the University of Georgia. So it was like camp, offer at camp. 3 weeks later, he a dog. All right, so it was just like that. And since he's been there, Kirby talked about how, they had to teach him how to play safety because he was a nickel kind of outside linebacker hybrid box player during high school. And then in college, having to learn how to play safety. You back up off the ball, and it's a little bit tougher to see things. You're seeing a lot more. There's a lot more to distract you and take, your eyes off of stuff. So having to learn how to play safety. And then this spring, after he's kind of gotten safety down, they bring Jake Pope in, Dan Jackson comes back, David Daniel-Sisavon's still on the roster. Hey, Malachi Stark's here still as well. But now we're real thin over here at star. So what are we going to do? Well, Ja'Cory's finally comfortable. Let's put him in there in that competition at the star position. So Kirby let us know today that not only is he competing at 2 different spots, but by giving us him during media availability, we know immediately this guy's on leadership council. This guy must be somebody that they are willing to put out in front of the media to speak on behalf of the program. So I expect big things out of Ja'Cory Thomas moving forward throughout his career. We'll talk a little bit more about him as a person and a player just in a second because, again, he was made available today. I thought this clip that we're going to play for you in a second, Kirby will do this every once in a while, and you really got to be on top of your shit to notice when he does it, okay? We've been talking about on Patreon, there is a new name mixing into the star position battle. And he's not new, but he is new to the position. And it's Daylen Everette. We told you guys on Patreon this week, hey, watch out. Daylen Everette gonna be experimenting with him playing the star position. A lot to do with maybe they need a little bit more there, or maybe they're better at corner than they are at star now, so they need to play more corners. Well, Kirby kind of let this one slip today when talking about Julian Humphrey and mentioning, hey, we're no longer a 2-corner system here at the University of Georgia. Play this clip for the folks.
He's had a good spring practice so far. I hope that continues. He's hungry. They got good competition going on at corner. We don't look at it as 2 corners. I mean, we look at it as if there's 4 corners that can play, one of them is going to also play star, and they'll all play. And the more winning football players we can have at corner, the better off our team can be.
All right, so there you hear him talk. You hear him say it, right? If we have 4 good corners, 3 of them will play, and 1 of them will bump into star. He's talking about Daylen Everette, guys. He's talking about rotate, and the 3rd corner, you know who the 3rd corner is? Ellis Robinson. That's who he's talking about. He's talking about playing Daniel Harris and Julian Humphrey at corner, mixing in Daylen Everette at star, and then having Ellis Robinson rotate, guys. That's what he just put in front of your face subtly without you paying attention if you don't subscribe to, or if you subscribe anywhere else. I don't know if anyone else is talking about this today, but I heard it immediately. Y'all heard me running the clips in there. I was like, oh, whoa. He slipped up. He slipped up because he doesn't very often give us much like that.
I mean, that was a big. It's interesting to know that you find a solution where there really almost wasn't a problem. Like you had a good problem of we have a lot of bodies in this defensive back room. Like we have good players. We have a guy that started all of last year, and then we had 2 guys that played really, really well at the tail end of the season. And now this year you have got to find out who's going to be the 2 guys. Well, it's like we have 3 of them, or we have 4 of them really, but we're going to make sure that all 4 of them get to play on the field.
Yeah, I'm honestly excited to see what Daylen Everette can do at that position. I know that he's gotten a lot of criticisms in the past for his play in 2023, but I think he's more than solid enough. And the fact that Kirby trusts him enough there, it's enough for me, honestly.
Must be a super smart football player.
Got to be.
To just be thrown into the mix there.
And I mean, like, from what I remember from 2023, anything bad that he was a part of wasn't because he was out of position or busted coverage or didn't seem like he knew what he was doing. It was just someone made a play against him. Like, I mean, going up against Luther Burden, yeah, you're going to get beat sometimes. That's just the way it is.
Big tampering time of the year. Obviously,
Always.
right? Yeah, you're right. There's no time of the year for tampering. It's tampering 24/7, 365 nowadays, it seems like, in college football. But Kirby made the room chuckle today when asked about tampering. Hey, what are you doing to mitigate this? What are you doing to gauge this? How are you going about making sure your roster's not getting poached? He had this to say.
Questions about what can you tell us about Daniel Harris and Janelle Aguero? We haven't seen a whole lot of them. Can you give us some pros and cons? Tell us a little bit more about them. But something you just mentioned about the portal, maybe people reaching out to him. How prevalent is tampering right now?
I don't know. I don't have a phone tap on anybody's phone. I don't have a wire. I'm not the feds, so I don't know. I can only tell you that when kids come in to see me, they have a plan. So they either did some pre-planning or something occurred, but it's really almost impossible to navigate or monitor or police. And I'll be honest with you, I don't get real lost over it, because the kids that stay will be the ones we coach, and the kids that go will have to provide an opportunity for somebody else, and that's really the way I look at it. We try to do the best job we can of being honest with our kids and sell what our program has done in the past. I tell the story millions of times of everybody's past different. And when you get on your phone and you hit maps and you go and put an address in, it shows you 6 different ways to get there. And everybody's path is different. And Coy Walker's was very different than Nakobe Dean. So each one is self, but each his own.
All right, so I thought the I don't have a phone tap on people. I don't have a tap on people's phones. I'm not the feds. Was pretty funny. But the one thing I don't believe him, and here's why. They are not a reactive bunch. They are a proactive program. Georgia does not sit around and sit on their hands and wait for bad things to happen. They are preventative in action. So he didn't admit it, and I don't know if he would, but I guarantee, I think I know what's happening. There's a guy by the name of Jonas Jennings in the building, and Jonas does a great job. I'm pretty sure he's the director of player relations or has a job title such like that. And Jonas's job is basically to understand where these young men's heads are at. What's going on in your world, son? How are we feeling? What do we think? You know what I mean? Like, this all started at the University of Georgia in COVID times, right? In 2020, the University of Georgia really, really revamped how they go about the mental health of their athletes. Getting to know their athletes. Skull sessions started happening, right? More scheduled meetings with coaches and different administrators inside the program. Getting to gauging the temperature in the room of how these young men feel and how they think and what their thought processes are. Guys, I would hope it's lip service to say, I want the guys who want to stay here. If you want to leave, that's fine. It's lip service. And it's great for you to say that. It's a great motto to have. It's a great thought process to have. However, you cannot sit by the sideline and just hope that your roster doesn't get picked apart. I don't believe that to be the case. Again, everything about Kirby Smart and his staff, guys, has said we are proactive people. We are not reactive people. So I find it hard to believe that Kirby Smart this spring is going to have people walking into his building or his office saying, Coach, I'm out of here. And he didn't have an inkling that it was going to happen. He is not surprised when these things happen. There's no way.
No,
I mean, we've heard stories of they kind of know when a player that they've known that players are going to be gone in like November before the season's even over. Like, they're already getting a gauge of like how players are feeling, like who's going to be here after December rolls around. Like, they already kind of get a feel of that mid-season sometimes. Like, they know. So it makes perfect sense that he would be out there saying that.
He said guys come to me with a plan. They come to me with a plan, an executed plan, a thought-out plan. They know where they are going. So if that's the case, if kids come to you with a plan, and this has happened for 2 straight years now, right? 2 years, 2 full 12-month cycles, 24 months this has been happening to these programs. I find it highly dubious that if players come to you with a plan, you do not already have a plan to replace that player that has a plan to leave you, right? This is a business about information collection. I find it hard to believe that Kirby's sitting on his hands here. And if it would be so counter to him, to who he is as a football coach.
Name one instance ever where Kirby Smart has sat on his hands for something, and it's kind of just like, well, we'll see what happens when it comes down the pipe, and then we'll react to that. I don't think that's ever been a case for Kirby Smart in the Georgia football program.
No.
I did think it was interesting, on the topic of tampering a little bit. Julian Humphrey talked about what made him want to, like, why he entered the portal and why he came back. And, everybody presumed what was going on there, assumed it was tampered. But he actually said, like, I went home. I felt like I needed to go home. But then I ultimately decided that I wanted to come back to Georgia. Now, I know it's his words.
He also very quickly after that in another question talked about, it's not about what other schools can offer me in terms of money. It was more about development here. So, come on. Yeah, he don't get to see his people. He talked about that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Julian Humphrey is a kid from Texas that his parents and his family members and his people that he loves and that love him did not get to have an opportunity to come out here very often because traveling is hard, right? So he is very lonely in these instances after games, and he gets to see all of his teammates, see other people, and all that good stuff. But we talked about Mexican standoffs earlier. That looked a whole hell of a lot like a goddamn Mexican standoff to me. We tweet out that we're hitting the portal, and all of a sudden we got coaches in our house in Houston, Texas. Like big-time coaches, like Georgia position coaches, taking time out of a very critical recruiting time period for them, okay, to go out to Houston to make sure Julian don't leave. Come on. So anyways, but yeah, the more important quote, the more interesting quote to me was the one right after the one we just played, where he's talking about Jonel Aguero, and he's talking about Daniel Harris. He's talking about these corners and these DBs that are in the middle of a position battle, right? This quote right here. If they want to stay here, they have bright futures. We have gotten to the point now, guys, where he talks about these guys as if he knows that they have options, and he knows that they're still contemplating these options, right? He didn't speak about Daniel Harris as when he finishes here, right? He didn't speak about Jonel Aguero. When he finishes here, he will be a great player. Talked about if they want to stay here, right? I think that was very important diction for us to hear today.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was intentional, or do you think that's just, talking?
I don't think that got us anything intentionally. Or excuse me, unintentionally. I think Kirby Smart is one of the more calculated human beings I've ever been around in my life. There's nothing that comes out of his mouth that he did not think about before he said it.
Interesting.
Do you think that he makes the players watch his press conferences?
No, but I think he says things in his press conferences knowing that some of his players do watch.
Or knowing that it could be clipped and put somewhere.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Knowing that it could be clipped, or knowing that someone like this is going to talk on a show like this. I'm not saying all the players watch this, but I know if coaches are watching us, players are watching us, I would imagine.
Facts.
In fact, I know players watch us because I was on Tate Ratledge's podcast, and he said so. And Cedric signed the board. So we know players are watching. But no, I think it was very important to hear that diction right there, if they want to stay here. He also mentioned how they believe they have the best home schedule in Georgia football history in 2025. Is that your take?
I said it. I said, is this the greatest schedule ever? And there you go. I think it's in totality, not even just home schedule. I mean, obviously home schedule, it absolutely is. But I think in totality, again, getting UCLA at the Rose Bowl, just being at the Rose Bowl in general, I don't care who you play. Get to go play in that venue. That's special.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one to be a UGA student.
Talked about how, I got the hardest road schedule in the country this year. I want the flip end of that in 2025. And if you didn't give me the flip of that, I would have been pissed. He didn't say that, but he's like, someone's going to get the raw end of the deal, and I don't want it to be me.
So do you think that means coaches were lobbying for this type of schedule format?
Yeah. Yeah, the ones who got shafted in 2024. Billy Napier screaming, give me that. I ain't going to be here. I ain't going to be here to get those teams at home, but give me that. Give me that for my predecessor, my next guy, right? My replacement. At least give him some leeway right there. He was asked about KJ Bolden, and I thought it was important to hear him say that I don't see kids as committed because they're not. They haven't signed yet. I don't see kids as committed. And the reason that's important, right, is because Justice Terry just committed to USC. Isaiah Gibson just committed to USC. 2 takes in this state, right? 2 priority takes in this state for that program and that board in 2025. They will not stop recruiting those individuals. I don't care what was promised, what was said, what discussions were had out there in LA this past weekend. They will not stop recruiting the rest of these guys the rest of the cycle, and they have to. They have to do a good job of pursuing guys like Justice and getting that kid back into the class because he's a vital, vital football player.
I mean, locking down the state, that's kind of become sort of, you have to. When you produce so much talent in state, especially guys like Justice Terry, it's important to get those guys at your program. So got to continue doing that for sure.
Big facts. He talked about Joseph Jonah getting 40 to 50 reps every day during practice right now because TID is out. So this is, it's very rare freshmen, during the spring, they get a lot of reps anyways. He said most freshmen are getting 20 to 30 reps, like good quality reps during practice, something they will not get in the fall. In the fall, you'll get 100 meaningless reps down there in scout team. They'll tell you they're meaningful, but midway through the year, you're going to be brother-in-law, and I'm telling you right now. What does that mean? I ain't going hard if you ain't going hard. We good? We got to get you to Saturday, big fella. Don't rush too hard over there, defensive end. We're going to take it easy today. We're going to bump Willis. Bump chests. That's what they used to tell us. Y'all quit bumping uglies. Y'all play football. But anyways, so that's what you're going to get a lot during the season. But during the spring, it's an opportunity for everybody to get reps, and a lot of them. And JJA getting a ton of reps this spring due to some availability from TID.
That's certainly, that's one of the things you want to look for most during the spring is kind of hearing about all those freshmen that are kind of getting an uptick in reps. And especially when you hear news like TID is going to be out of spring, you're like, okay, where are those reps going to be allocated toward? And I think it's great that a freshman like JJA is getting those reps because it seems like by all means he's going to turn into one of these vital players for Georgia. Very easily could be one of these freshmen on defense. It seems like Georgia has it every single year that one of these freshmen kind of steps up at least at that halfway mark. And from that point on, they're one of those familiar faces on the defense side of the football. And it seems like he very well could be one of those, and it could be allocated because he got these reps in the springtime.
Yeah, I'm working on this. So.
Oh, good work.
Sorry.
we got all kinds of things going on. I'm texting sources. You're editing articles. You're carrying shell.
That's what I do.
The question he was originally asked is how do you foresee the development of JJA coming out? It's Connor Riley asked a question. If I were to critique Connor, because I think I know what he was trying to do, I think Connor was talking more about size development, like what position. I don't want to portray Connor's thoughts, but that's when I heard it, I was like, oh, you know what I know, which is JJA is not going to be 280 pounds much longer. JJA is going to be 305 within 6 months. There's very little doubt in my mind. Joseph Jonah Ajonye, 18 months ago, was 240 pounds in high school. Within 12 months of his recruitment cycle, he was 275. Okay?
Yeesh.
Like that. And it wasn't bad weight. This ain't a guy he has been breathing oxygen and adding muscle mass. And that's what this has been happening. You know why? You know why?
Why? You've been eating good.
Nah. Do you know why?
Nigerian
bloodlines. That's why. The boy swelled up like a balloon. Okay? And he's going to continue to as long as he's at Georgia eating good food and lifting good weights. I imagine JJA, in the chat's on it right now, he's still 17 years old. I imagine
That's
JJA.
insane.
Yeah, no. I imagine Joseph Jonah Ajonye being 295 pounds by the end of this calendar year. So, yeah, what he's playing defensive end for now, even sometimes rotating in at the jack room. Like, this is a really, really athletic big man that's getting bigger and bigger. So, interesting to hear that. Also, interesting to hear Kirby Smart talk about Micah Morris's contact violence. And Micah following that up in his press conference, talking about, you see me, you better have your mouthpiece in. I love that quote. I never would say something like that because I knew I was a pansy when it came to contact. That's why I played offensive line. Most offensive line, we've had this discussion. Most offensive linemen, y'all ain't about that life. Y'all are not. Micah is. Micah about that life. And that's why he looks like that on tape. And that's why everybody knows it about him. But the rest of you guys, y'all just trying to stay in front of people. Let's be honest. Okay? Or else you'd still be playing defense if you were a headhunter and a murderer. So, yeah, Micah violence and contact aggression is apparent. Thought his response about Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse were very revealing. And it was a question that kind of got snuck in there. And, it was about having Warren and Nas back and what it adds value to practice and all this good stuff. And they've taken a bunch of reps. And his immediate answer was, we got to make sure we aren't stunting growth. I haven't heard him talk about this. I haven't heard him acknowledge that some of these older guys coming back might put you at risk for not creating growth with some of your younger guys. So he talked about this spring being very cautious, I think was the word he used. Very cautious and aware of the amount of reps that Warren and Nazir are taking. Because Jordan Hall's got to get development. Ja Jarrett's got to get development. Kristen Miller obviously has a knee injury, but guys, some of these younger guys that have been back in these rooms, they have to get development. I thought that was very interesting.
The question my bad, Jay. The question I have for that is, do you in turn hurt or degrade the further development you have of those guys who are in the room? Or are you at a point where they're so fully developed, they're pretty much who they are at this point? They don't need the reps as much.
He said the same exact thing about Stetson Bennett a couple of years ago. Stetson, we know who Stetson is. We're comfortable in what that is. We have to get reps for some of these older guys. So I think it's more of that. I mean, let's be honest. Nazir Stackhouse, this is 5th year of college football, 4th year of playing meaningful snaps.
Right.
Same thing for Warren Brinson. But guys, y'all are who you are. You came back to improve your draft stock, but you should be in the NFL right now where guess what? You're not going to get a bunch of practice reps to develop. So you're this year kind of having a pseudo rookie year. That's what this is. It's a pseudo rookie year for Nas and Warren in the sense of practice reps and how much development time's available for you, buddy. Been 48 months of development time. It's time to roll. You know what I mean? We got to get some development time for some of these younger cats. It's time for you to roll. And that's the first time I've heard him talk about not sacrificing the development of younger guys for older guys coming back.
It makes me think back to, I think it's the first day you were over there at the building and at spring practice where you're like, Jordan Hall is over there working with Nazir Stackhouse the first group. I know it's a very small snippet of practice, so it's not the entire story, but it does make me think like maybe that's why Jordan Hall is in that position. It's like he needs these more than you do, Warren, so you need to take a step back on this one, and we're going to make sure that 44 is over here getting in that work.
And also, by the way, let's let the body breathe. You know, Nas and Warren are guys that have been playing bang-up football for a long time. Let's let the body breathe this spring when we don't necessarily need you to. So that kind of wraps up Kirby's press conference. Again, always a lot there to kind of dig through as long as you're looking for the right stuff. Again, I would imagine other networks are going to be talking about it now, or maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe they have already. But he gave you the biggest nug I've ever heard him give you in the middle of a press conference, the fact that he is rotating a corner in at star now already. So I thought that was very important today. As were the player press conferences. I love getting in front of these players and asking them specific football questions because it kind of gives them one of those, that was a football question. Like Ernest Green today. Ernest Green, for those of you who don't know, does not look like an offensive tackle. Ernest Green is just over 6'3", might be listed at 6'4", but he's like 6'3", 330 pounds, real thick in the mids, doesn't have long limbs, doesn't have super skinny ankles, doesn't look like Andrew Thomas, doesn't look like Isaiah Wilson, doesn't even look like Warren McClendon. He actually kind of looks like a guard. Doesn't actually, he does. He looks like an offensive guard. And I felt not nervous, but I felt kind of some type of way asking this question because this is obviously an SEC starter. This is a guy who believes and solely believes that he is an offensive tackle. But the rest of his football career, he's going to get asked the question I asked him today, which is, Ernest, you do not have offensive tackle, particularly left tackle measurables. You are not tall. You are not long. You are not physically built like a left tackle. How are you overcoming that? How are you playing at the rate that you are without any of the measurables that we have become to know this position for? His answer was the exact answer I knew I was going to get. My footwork and my technique are far beyond what other people's has to be. He didn't say that. He basically said that. One of the direct quotes was, I have to play with the technique and pad level that others might be able to get away with, right? I have to be perfect. And you heard Micah Morris, he was asked about Ernest Green, what makes him so good? And he said, don't you ever tell Ernest I said this, because I like to give him a lot of crap. And I like to talk crap to him, but Ernest has the best feet I've ever seen. And it pops up on tape. The only way you're going to be this great without the twitch that the rest of these guys play with, guys, you went from Broderick frickin' Jones to Ernest Green. The two cannot be polar opposites, even more than they are, right? The way he gets it by is with technique and footwork, and you see it.
Would you say he's like a Jamari Sawyer?
No, I would say he's an Isaiah Wynn without the Isaiah Wynn high-end athleticism. Isaiah Wynn was, as perfect gets from an athletic movement skill set. I think Ernest is a little bit stiffer and just he looks like he carries weight differently than Isaiah does. Yeah. Isaiah didn't look like he was carrying. I don't want to call it bad weight because I saw him today. His chest is filled out. He doesn't carry bad weight. But he's kind of barrel framed in the middle. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's not your typical tackle frame. These guys are built more like power forwards than they are like Big Baby Davis.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely it's one of the oldest things. Footwork is most important, fundamentals. Like they go back to that joke where, run fundamentals. But the fact that he has that bodes well for him because otherwise if he didn't, I don't think the size and the disadvantages that he has elsewhere are going to be able to make him succeed at this position, much less in the SEC.
He said one of the first things he learned about offensive line play is we can talk about striking, we can talk about punching with our hands, we can talk about keeping our head out, But it always boils down to blocking people with your feet. If I can get that person in my parking spot, right? If I can get them in my framework, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. And that's what he does over and over and over again. Never, I think maybe once last year, he got beat on an inside move, but you will never see this kid overset. He never is impatient. He's never out over his toes. I've not once shown you guys a clip of him getting ripped down on his face like sometimes we see Xavier Truss do, or sometimes last year as a freshman Monroe Freeling would put on tape. This guy plays with perfection in his technique, and that's why he wins. Mm-hmm. I still think he's going to get questions on the NFL level. He still might have to kick in. But, you know, Kirby's talked about it, and he talked about it today. He takes pride in being a tackle. He takes pride in overcoming the things that he has to do to be a tackle.
Let me ask you this, and this is me not knowing enough about the offensive line as far as fundamentals go. When you play offensive tackle, is the transition from going to tackle to guard easier? Like, does playing offensive tackle give you an advantage by going to offensive guard because it's an easier position because you're not isolated as much?
Yeah, it's always easier because you're not on an island. But the answer to that is different upon each individual. Do you struggle with your anchor at tackle? Can you not drive people off the ball? You're not going to be able to kick into guard because it's that much harder. You're moving 250-pound guys at defensive end. You're moving 300-pounders at defensive tackle. So it's a much different thing. But are you having problems with overall athleticism? Like, are you getting run by? Is speed a problem for you? Is the twitch of some of these edge rushers a problem? Then, yeah, it's going to feel a whole hell of a lot easier kicking into guard. This is something Tate talked about. Tate Ratledge, when he first got to college, he was trying to play right tackle. And he knew, like, first day of off-season one-on-ones reps against some of these guys, he went into the office and was like, I'm not doing this. I'm kicking into guard. We're going to be fine. I'm 6'6". I'm 330 pounds. I need to get guys in my parking spot now. I don't need to wait and allow them to have, you know, all this extra room where I can't overcome my my disadvantages as an athlete. So yeah and no. Yes, if you got a good anchor, if you got a big thick ass and some thick quads and you can drive people off the ball, transition's easy. But if you're a thin guy, you need to stay outside. That answers your question. Super excited to see him. More growth from an effort standpoint. Do you think Kirby on these SEC insides, do you think he has some type of input on what gets out?
Probably.
For sure.
But he doesn't have time to sit there and watch a full hour episode. Do you think they just send him a clip of the quotes that they use from him?
I think there's definitely someone on staff that probably does that for them. Yeah. Like some type of media control type of thing where maybe they are talking to Kirby, or maybe they just kind of already know, like, what are the types of things that we want being put out onto this. Like, for instance, like them putting the clip from the 2022 national championship season of them like practicing the rep of Keely Ringo making the interception, and then he goes and does it. Like, they very purposely, in my opinion, put that in there. Like, they want that out there showing, like, it translates, man.
Yeah, I think there's also times when it's like, hey, cameras are rolling right now, Kirby. So he might change what he says a little bit.
The only reason I ask is because last year SEC Inside released a clip of Kirby talking to Ernest, saying like, "Did you watch Broderick Jones on tape, son? Have you seen what this guy did last year for us? Did you watch him run downfield? Did you watch the level of effort that he has played with for us?" And then he slaps him on the helmet. He's like, "That's the last thing for you. The last thing for you is to play like your hair's on fire." And if you hear Ernest Green talk today, that's exactly what he talked about. The last level, he talked about blocking. He didn't say the echo of the whistle, but that's what he was insinuating. I have to be able to block through the echo of the whistle, and that starts with conditioning. We got Micah Morris today as well. He wants you to know, man, he about that action. He is about that action. And it makes sense, dude. Camden County, 6'5", 330 pounds, 450-pound bench presser. He was squatting over 600 pounds as a freshman. This is
absurd.
This is one of the freakier individuals that's ever walked the building up there at Georgia. And, man, he looked good today from a weight perspective. He always has looked thick, like he's carrying a little bit too much weight. Not today. Not today. There was very, very little body fat left on Micah Morris today, which is terrifying.
That's horrifying if you're a defensive player.
It's interesting to me that he's one of the more violent humans because he's kind of soft-spoken. Like, he doesn't strike me as, like, one of these – like, if you just walked up on him, you listened to a talk, you would never think that, like, oh, he's going on the field and murdering people later.
No, he about it. And he's a young kid as well. He signed at Georgia's 17-year-old kid. So I think that would make him just 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good God.
20 years old. But you mentioned the soft-spokenness and introverted nature. That's the way I've always felt about him too. He spoke really, really confident about his skill sets today. And I think it's worth noting that, like, this is an NFL – that we all know this is an NFL football player, right? We all agree?
Yes.
We all say he has the highest ceiling of all three?
Yeah.
Dylan Fairchild, Tate Ratledge, and then him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say so.
I would say so as well. Like, if they were to all be drafted tomorrow, I think Micah might go highest. He won't start this year.
That's how it goes.
And if he does, he'll be rotating out really, really quickly. That's pretty crazy. Was interesting, very interesting to talk to him. It was almost more pleasing and interesting to talk to Ja'Cory Thomas today, a cat that we didn't even know about. Really,
This is his first media appearance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But from a we didn't know about him standpoint, like I remember when he first committed. I was still working construction at the time, and I ran off the job site and called some sources. Like, is this real? Like, who is this kid? He came out of nowhere. And they were like, yeah, man, that's a Muschamp brother right there. That's a Muschamp take right there. Came up, camped, balled out, got an offer. 18 days later, committed to the University of Georgia. And I thought the most important thing, I asked him about it. It was like, you come up here, you camp. You're not really a highly touted recruit at that time. I think he was getting recruited by a bunch of really, really small schools. Comes up to Georgia, camps for Georgia, gets an offer that day at camp, spends 17 days mulling it over, seeing some other schools that then emerged and offered, like Florida, trailing for once in that situation. And then they're almost always offered first, and then Georgia follows everybody else. They're like the last kind of nod of approval. This is a different case for Ja'Cory. But I thought it was important to hear him talk about how meeting with Kirby Smart and talking with Kirby Smart and hearing just the word he used was genuine. We hear about the intensity from Kirby Smart all the time, right? We hear about the microphone instances. We hear about, different levels of the intensity from him. Very rarely do I hear a player, not that it's just new. It's not that it's not true. Very rarely is the first thing I hear is he was really genuine. Like I just felt, what he was telling me was what I needed to hear, or, I felt at home in the conversation with him. 9 times out of 10, people want to play with him because they know that he's going to squeeze everything out of them. It felt like maybe not necessarily a different approach, but that's the first time I've heard that one.
Maybe a different perception of it.
Yes.
And I think maybe it has to do with the fact that maybe you probably have to recruit a Ja'Cory Thomas a little differently than you do some of your other players, like maybe the 5-star in the next class. Like maybe you do have to, like, going to a kid like Ja'Cory Thomas where you're like, is this real? Like, what the heck? Who is this kid? Like, you come in there and you have to be genuine about, like, we believe in you. Like, we believe that you can serve a role on this football team. Like, this is not an offer just to throw it out there. Like, so maybe that's kind of showing the Kirby Smart's ability to be flexible and kind of manipulate himself a little bit on the recruiting trail.
All right, I got one more for you. It was Julian Humphrey, or as they call him, Julio. What's up?
I thought you were about to ask a trivia question.
No, I do have a trivia question for you. We're going to get to it. You want it now?
I love trivia questions.
All right, let's do it right now. The last time the University of Georgia failed to score a touchdown in a football game.
Oh, that's Missouri 2015.
You would be wrong.
What?
You'd be wrong. It was 2015. It was not the Missouri game, even though I don't think they scored a touchdown.
They didn't. They had 2 games without scoring touchdowns.
2 games without scoring a touchdown with Nick Chubb on their football team.
I would have put $1,000 on the Missouri game.
I remember the Missouri game very well. That was Marshall Morgan, 9-6 final score.
Did they get shut out?
I don't know. It's just in the books right here.
You're going to have to tell me.
Who was it?
Florida, 2015.
That's right. It was the Fatone Bauda game.
Fatone Bauda.
Even though it was Fat and Bada or whatever you would have said.
Fatone?
I got a little
Fatone
Brooks
Bauda.
enunciation right there. Even though it was that game, I still would have felt like we got into the end zone at some point.
I think it was like 24-3 was the final score of that game.
You did not get into the end zone in that football game.
Yeah.
Dang, Mark Rick.
Julian Humphrey spoke to the media today. Let's coach you up right here, Julio. Remove the likes. You see how I just elongated the pause there? Just hold the pause. If you're thinking, just think. Same thing for anybody speaking in front of a microphone. Just stop.
Oh, big light guy?
Yeah, big light guy. Big light guy. What do they call those? Audible
filler words.
Filler words and cushions.
and
and breaks and likes and things like that. But other than that, really insightful interview from a perspective of you got to understand that part of the reason he left was because he would get done with football games and he'd see all of his teammates or most of his teammates they got their family with them. They got their, their loved ones, their aunts, their uncles, their moms, their dads, their brothers, their cousins coming to these football games and supporting them. Julio, in the midst of missing his family, he's a kid from Houston, Texas, didn't have these opportunities. Mom wasn't able to come to football games. Family wasn't able to come to football games last year because it's such a long travel. He says 12 hours drive from Houston. So he missed his family. And it was something that he explored, maybe entering the portal and going back a little bit closer to home. And when I first heard that, I think of Texas A&M immediately. And that was an option. And then he weighed those options and inevitably decided that, through conversations with Kirby and through conversations with, I believe, Dante at the time, or maybe was it Fran that went out there to see him?
I think it was Fran.
Either way, coaching staff went out there to see him and kind of make him feel at home. And part of the conversation was, son, you're on the precipice of a massive year for you. If you just do what you're supposed to, if you stay where you're at and grow where you're planted, you have NFL future written all over you. You just got to finish the drill here. And they laid it out for him and said, look, man, we got proof of concept like we've talked about all the time on this channel. So he ultimately, inevitably decided to stay at the University of Georgia. And I think it's going to pay dividends for him very, very quickly in this coming year. I think he's going to be one of the 2 starters. Like we said, I think inevitably there is a strong chance that come September, you're looking at, like Kirby mentioned today, 3 corners. You're looking at Daniel Harris, Julian Humphrey, and Dalen Everett in at the star. I think it's very, very likely, or not likely, it's very, very possible that might happen. I, however, thought it was far more important to ask him who would be the 4x1 team for the University of Georgia, because this is a football team that's got go-go juice on the track. So he had his own inclination of what the 4x1 team. Do you want to hear mine?
Let's hear it.
I got a SEC gold medalist winning track team right here.
Can I guess what it is?
Can we guess first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Arian Smith.
He is the third leg, which I found out today was the most important.
Anthony Evans.
Yep.
No. But
really?
For the joke of it.
Okay.
Then I don't know.
I got Julio at the league leg. He was 10.28 in high school in the 100. And I got Kyron Jones. Kyron Jones is a 10.3 flat guy coming out of North Carolina. And then Arian's a 10 flat guy. And then I put CJ Allen because I just love to see it.
Good God.
CJ Allen was 10.96 guy coming out of high school at 225 pounds.
That's terrible.
So there's a possibility that CJ Allen's got 10.6 in his system if he gets down to like 208. And wouldn't that be fun to watch?
That's an anchor if you've ever heard of it.
The nation's premier linebacker potentially this year, running anchor leg for a 4x1 team that's going, what would that be, like sub 40 seconds?
That's,
sub 41 seconds?
I would go sub
like 41 half.
43 probably.
Yeah, sub 42 for sure. That'd be cool. But that would be mine. But yeah, Arian Smith would be, or you would be on that, or Anthony Evans, excuse me, would definitely be on that list. He was a 10.41.
He's like a 10.4, 10.3
maybe,
something like that.
A lot of speed, and we left Daniel Harris off on that, who was a 10.78 guy, 6'3".
Jeez.
How in the hell was Daniel Harris not ranked way higher?
I don't know.
Daniel Harris nowadays would be 5-star number 1 corner in America. 6'3", 10.78. Good God. He'd be like that cat from California right now that's a top-ranked corner. I'm drawing blanks on names. Anyways, that wraps up our press conference conversation. Should we rank these rooms?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here's how this is going to go. We have 9 position groups to go through here, okay? And here's how we rank this. You obviously have quarterback, running back, offensive line, tight ends, wide receivers. That handles the offensive side of the football. You have defensive line. Okay, so what we are including in defensive line are interior defensive linemen, defensive tackles, nose tackles, and defensive ends. Okay, then you have edge rushers. That's all your Jacks, Sams, all those guys. Okay, that's a position group. Then you have the safeties group. Then you have the corners group, which includes the star position. Okay, and then you have the linebacker group. There are 9 position groups at the University of Georgia. And here's how we're going to do this. Each one of us are going to rank our position groups 1 through 9. The room will then discuss those rankings, debate those rankings, and then we will go on to the next ranking group. I'm going to start first. Okay, and here's how I'm going to start last. Jay Will, you're up first. How do you rank these teams or these position groups?
So my first team that I have the Jack at number 1.
Ooh.
Yep. I got offensive line at number 2. I got the inside linebackers at number 3. DBs at number 4. Safeties at number 5. QB room at number 6.
Ooh.
Running backs at number 7. Defensive line and defensive ends at number 8. Wide receivers at number 9. And then tight ends rounding it out at 10.
Did have 10 position groups. My bad. All right, I got a couple things that you got to defend here. Quarterback at 6 is really, really low for a room that's got the number 1 quarterback arguably in the country.
But I kept you go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with him on that.
Yeah.
I kept going back and forth with it because I was placing the quarterback room all around, and then finally, like, this was a list I ended up with. And it's honestly just because, like, holistically, like, when I think about it, I thought of the quarterback room as this. That position group has the most to lose. That position group, like, if your number 1 guy is out, like, you're basically cooked. Not to say that Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi wouldn't be successful or anything, but, like, there's a major drop off there from Carson Beck to the next guy. So it made me a little hesitant to say that they're one of the 4 best position groups at Georgia. Again, that's not a reflection of Carson Beck's ability. It's just that compared to these other rooms, the depth that they bring to this, I think that's why I put them at that position.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I think the other thing I need you to defend, wide receivers are having a really, really good spring all the way down at 9. Explain yourself.
It probably because I'm still very hesitant to just push all in on this position group. Like, I've heard it before, man.
You know what? I am too.
I've heard it before.
I am at the point now where show me on Saturday. Stop telling me. Show me on Saturday.
I don't want to spoil anything, but for the question segment that we have, that's one of my questions.
Mine is too. I don't want to spoil too much too, but will the receivers be as advertised? That's the number 1 question I have. It's like, I have heard over and over and over again since I've been covering this beat that, hey, this is the year. We got guys. We got guys. We got guys. We got guys.
And then also, like, again, it feels weird to say, like, the tight end group is the worst position group at Georgia, in my opinion. But again, that just goes with, like, Oscar Delp. That's amazing. You got a third-year guy in that room who's going to be really good for you. After that, I don't really know.
Where'd you put the tight end room?
I put them, there's 10 position groups. I put them at 9th.
Yeah, I put them 10. So we're all in agreement that the tight end room, I mean, due to what's been going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, look at what the tight end room was for the last 3 years to what it is now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in comparison to what it was for the last 3 years, it's like, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with the talent in the room. It's just, it's not as elite as it once was.
Why do you like the O-line group so much?
I just think from the 5 that you have right now, like, you can plug in whoever you want at left guard. I don't care who you do it. I think that group from top to bottom, like, they're as solid as almost any other position in this football team. They have the
fewest amount of question marks by far.
I mean, those questions that we had about them coming to spring get answered really, really quickly. I think
just one who's going to play. Like, are you going to be great at center?
Yeah, and I think you have a tremendous balance of, you got Tate Rowledge and you got Xavier Trust, who are true vets. I mean, absolute true vets of that room. You got a returning starter in Ernest Green at the left tackle spot. You have a bunch of reps spread across the room, and Dylan Fairchild, Jared Wilson has been in the mix, Micah Morris. And then also hearing these inklings about Daniel Calhoun, that's going to be a dude. Monroe Freeling looked good at right tackle against Vanderbilt. I just think from top to bottom with the guys at your travel squad, that's almost hard to beat.
I'll go ahead and spoil it.
State, but
I'll go ahead and spoil it. Like, offensive line is my number 1 for that exact reason too. Like, you have 6 to 7 guys that I feel like you could plug anywhere and have success on the offensive line spot.
I have a counter take that I'll get to when I get to my rankings.
Okay.
But the other thing I have for you, Jack at number 1, is there enough oxygen in that room to say that that's the best room? Because there's only one of them on the field normally at a time.
I know, and I think I
think it'll be a little bit different this year, like we talked about the other night. They're going to play a little bit more of a rotation. But.
And honestly, if I were to redo the list, I probably would change that. I don't know who I would put at number 1. I guess bump up offensive line to number 1 potentially, but I just think maybe the depth is what really was like, okay, you got options. You got a lot of options, and again, a great point on saying that there is only one person on the field. I think that absolutely should play a role in this, but I mean, and maybe it is because I have a little bias of Michael Williams playing that position. I'm excited for that.
It's a huge bump to that room, man.
Yeah.
Just from a production and skill set standpoint. All right, Kirby, what do you got?
All right, so I'll go ahead and say I had a hard time doing this because
I think we all did.
Because the thing is,
hold on. You gave yourself an ISO, but not J. Will, did you?
No, he gave me one.
Okay. I was over here dicking around. My bad. I was about to say, bro, what the hell? Go ahead. My bad.
No, I had a hard time doing this because there are some rooms that have immense talent, like more talented than others, but then there's other rooms that have a lot of depth.
Yeah.
And I think the offensive line is probably the best of the both worlds, where there's a lot of great talent in that room and there's a lot of good depth. So I have them at number 1. I have inside linebackers at number 2. I think you have 3 really solid guys for 2 positions there. I put running back next. This is the healthiest and the deepest the room's been in probably 4 or 5 years. So then I have corner/star. I think the talent that you have around that, especially with Dale and Everett moving to that star position now, you've got 4 really solid options there. I went to receiver for 5th, just because I think that they do have a lot of talent in that room, but like you all said, it's more of a show me standpoint now. Like we've heard about it. We're hearing great things in the spring. Let's see it on Saturdays. I have Jack next. There's just not a lot of breathing room. There's a lot of talent in the room, but it's one guy, and he's probably going to be the guy. So after that, I have safeties. I think losing Javon Bullard and Tyke Smith really hurt that group. There's talent in there. KJ Bolden seems to be making new strides, but I just don't think that it's going to be what you've had the last few years.
It's either bank on like guys who have experience being a backup, or by the end of the year, the 5-star hopefully taking over.
Right.
I believe in Dan Jackson and David Daniels Sisfon. I also believe there's a reason they haven't been playing the last 2 years.
Exactly. Then I have quarterback for a lot of the same reasons that Jay Will had him. Carson Beck is the best, if not one of the 2 best quarterbacks in college football this year. He's an All-American, bona fide, might be the Heisman winner. But the problem is you go after that, and it's like Gunnar Stockton, a guy who hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time. The most playing time he got was in a blowout against Florida State. And then a true freshman, Ryan Puglisi. I mean, even Kirby Smart has said, like, we're trying to get this room deeper. We're looking for that 4th quarterback. So that's kind of the indication as to why I have him so low on the list. Then we talked about tight end. It's just not, the room's not what it was past 2 or 3 years. And then defensive end, defensive tackle. I think that looking at that, this is probably the weakest link of the Georgia team holistically, but it's still a very talented room, and there's still a lot of guys that can do good things in there.
Yeah, they need a flash player in that room.
Yeah.
They need a flash player bad in that room. I think they still think Xavier McLeod has an opportunity to maybe be that high-end flash player, but it's a matter of consistency moving forward. All right, a couple things I want to ask you about, maybe push back on you. You already talked about quarterback being that low. I'm in agreement with you on the tight end defensive line class. You know what? I don't have a lot of pushback. Oh, running back high.
Yeah.
3. Really high
for me.
I just felt like I'm looking at more. I did a lot of this in looking back at recent years.
Yeah.
Like last year, you started the season with Cash Jones as your running back. This year, it's, hey, is Roger Robinson or Trevor Etienne going to be the starting guy, which are 2 great options. And then, oh, by the way, wait till Branson Robinson gets healthy. I think that there's a lot of really, really good options in this running back room that you haven't had necessarily in the last few seasons. So I think that's kind of why they gave that boost.
I think right now, that room is a little bit lower on my rankings. Talk to me when I know Branson Robinson's Branson Robinson.
That's
again.
fine, yeah.
And I don't want to cause things for concern. And I know Kirby said he should be good in several weeks from now, but that was not your typical ACL injury. That was a PCL. Okay, that was PCL and ACL. That's
I thought it was his patella tendon.
That's what I call a PCL.
Okay,
your patella. I mean, so it is a big. I know the PCL is actually the back, but I get all kind of Hold on.
Source.
Yeah.
But no, I do think that I might have running backs just a little high. I think that's just an excitement of having that room being so loaded. But
so many teams trying to leverage later spring games and water down depth charts / position battles to try to retain the roster. A lot of finagling, a lot of maybe finessing going on right now in some of these position battle discussions. The opposite of what we're talking about at Texas A&M. Right? Texas A&M's like, we got a guy. Those other 2 guys are just placeholders this spring. F them. We'll see if they hit the portal. Everybody else is kind of like, nah, baby, you got a shot. You got a shot to win this job. So yeah, I'm sorry to stop the show. Every once in a while, you got to read those.
I want to hear what your rankings are.
All right, here we go. 10 to 1, 1 to 10.
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
You know
That's what we did. We did
right,
1 to 10.
1 to 10. 1 to 10. Number 1. I think Georgia has the best combination at linebacker in the country.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't like to do the it's not even close thing, but I think Smile Mondon's a top 45, top 50 pick in next year's NFL draft. I think CJ Allen might have a chance to go down as like a top 3 linebacker at the University of Georgia. So like, boom, bang, done. And then you add guys like Raylan Wilson into that group. You add guys like Jalen Walker into that group. I'm considering him an inside linebacker until he's not. Until they just say all you do is play on third down, Jalen Walker gets added into that room. He's a tremendous lifeblood. By the way, I've been ranting about the freshmen. They're ungodly creatures out there running around. They're incredible. So I think eventually that room's going to be just We're going to talk about that room at the linebacker position in 18 months like we talked about the tight end room for 3 years at the University of Georgia. I think that is the facts. Now, you guys had the quarterback position ranked lower. I had it ranked higher, and I have a lot of differences in my rankings because I ranked, do you have a difference maker? Do you have an absolute showstopper at that position? And I think like linebacker, they have 2 of them. Quarterback, they have 1. Corner, they have some really, really high-end football players. And then offensive line is at 4 for me because they don't have one of these. Like Michael Morris might be a first-round draft pick. Dylan Fairchild will be a high second-round draft pick. Tate Ratledge will be a high second-round draft pick. Ernest Green will be a day 2 draft pick. Okay, we'll see what happens at right tackle. Xavier Truss probably going to be a 5th, 4th, 5th, 6th-round draft pick. Right? They don't have one of these stamped blue chippers right now at this position, though they have a tremendous amount of depth. Where I look at the quarterback spot, I have them ranked 2 because they have a blue chipper. They have Carson Beck. They have one of the nation's best. And when you have one of the nation's best, I think you get vaulted up these rankings, or at least you should be. And I know you guys talked about the significant drop-off, or at least a noticeable drop-off between Beck and Gunnar Stockton. I think Gunnar Stockton did enough for me in the Florida State game to know that he's serviceable. If you throw him out there, you're not going to die. Your season's not shot and you take it out back and kill it. It's not one of those situations. And the Puglisi upside for me, it's there. It's there. It's tremendous. Just the amount of talent and raw traits that football player has. I'm with y'all from a depth perspective, but if you're going to be shallow on depth, make it the quarterback.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's great to have 4, but the 4th's never going to get on the field.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's been that kind of deal. I put corners at 3 because it is indeed including the star. And when I rattle off these names, I see SEC starters. Dalen Everett's an SEC starter. I don't care what you think of him. I think he's an SEC starter. Julian Humphrey's an SEC starter. Daniel Harris is an SEC starter. Ellis Robinson, SEC starter. Janelle Aguero, SEC starter. Kyron Jones, let's hold off. But tremendous talent, tremendous upside. Ja'Cory Thomas can start in this conference at other schools. You're very, very deep. You have like first world problems at corner in the sense of, will we find 2 guys or will we be playing 5 guys this fall? So I have them there because of just the tremendous upside. Now, granted, maybe some attrition in this room. I don't want to forecast attrition, but your head coach is talking about if they choose to stay. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be some attrition. I have offensive line there, talked about it. Lacking star power, but god dang, is it deep? And does it have 0 questions? Okay, they might as well just stay healthy this spring. Don't just practice, do what you need, but y'all ain't got to answer no questions. I got edge at 5 just because, again, there's not enough air in this room. There's just not. You got Michael, Damon Wilson, Sam Mpemba, Chaz Chambliss, you name it. They got plenty of options to get after the quarterback and stop the run on first and early downs. They got plenty of talent there. It's probably the highest ceiling of a group, but just not enough air for them to breathe and all those guys to get meaningful extended snaps. I put safety in at 6. You have a star player. You have a bona fide, guaranteed first-round draft pick, which made me want to put them higher. But outside of that, there's a bunch of unknowns, man. Like the chat's talking about Dan Jackson having playing time and experience. Yeah, in 2022, you get a lot of playing time in 2023. This guy been sitting on the shelf for 12 months, right? David Daniel Sisifon. The most playing time that guy got, I think, was in 2020 when Lewis Seen damn killed Kyle Pitts. You know what I mean? Like that's the most playing time David Daniel Sisifon's got. And even that game, old buddy that transferred, Major Burns, was getting a lot of time in that game. So David Daniel Sisifon been on this roster a long time. Super smart football player, probably going to get a targeting penalty or 3 this fall. But has not played a lot of football. So there's a lot of questions at that safety room for me. I put 7 wide receiver. I'm with you guys. I am at a point now where I'll tell you when they're doing great. I'll tell you when I'm hearing from it, but I'm not putting stock in it. I'm not buying it until I see it. And then once I see it, we're pushing the chips in on Georgia being, elite at that position. But I know they got talent. They've always had talent. Produce. I put running back at 8. Just with Branson being healthy, I'll have a new discussion. Whenever I see 22 back on the field and looking like 22 did, we'll have a different discussion. However, the building feels better about the running back room than they ever have, or at least than they have in recent memory from what you're talking about, right? Shit, last spring, Cash Jones was taking reps with the ones. I love Cash Jones. I think Cash Jones is a great football player, great running back. He's not Georgia's number 1 running back. Shouldn't be in any normal year, right? I have defensive line number 9 for all the reasons you guys did, and I had the tight end room at number 10. It's the thinnest the tight end room's been in a long, long time at the University of Georgia.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, I don't think that I have any too much to disagree with you on that. I mean, we all discussed why we had the quarterback room ranked so differently, but other than that, solid list. It's hard to rank this because, like we said, there's groups that have immense talent at
Hard to rank the top. I don't think it's hard to rank the bottom.
No, yeah, that's true. It's hard. It's even harder in the middle because there's talent in some groups, but there's not as much depth. It's like, what do you value more, talent or depth at a position? So
yeah, I think that getting in the middle parts, it like for me when I had quarterback at 6, I think is what I had them. It was like it feels weird putting them in at 6, but I feel like you got something to say
you
over
look
there.
like you've got something juicy going on over there.
Yeah, I got stuff I can't say on public television. I'll see you over on patreon.com/SportsAustin. I got stuff to report right now. We'll see you. No hot mics. Make sure you hit that stream.